Consider this as part 2 to my ongoing Postal franchise retrospectives. Things may change in the future, but I do plan to cover Postal 2's DLC, mods, the movie, Postal 3, oh god, and 4. Despite having 2 in the name, a lot of people overlook or forget entirely that Postal 2 is, in fact, a sequel to a game just called Postal. I recommend you watch my video about that game before this one, but just as a refresher, what exactly happened in Postal 1? Oh yeah, that. When people talk about the most depraved and shocking video games of all time, the original Postal is always there, lingering in the shadows as it cradles its firearm. Postal is a pitch-black, schizophrenic meltdown of an isometric shooter buried in the aesthetics of rusted metal and fleshy earth. The term the game was named after, Going Postal, was coined after a series of shocking incidents of workplace violence within the US Postal Service. Gently transitioning us to the run-and-gun gameplay Postal demands of you with the subtlety of a Tomahawk missile campaign. This is a violent, horrific game to behold visually and sonically. The loading screens are terrifying, the soundtrack is ghastly, and this was all intended by the brilliantly twisted minds of the game development company Running with Scissors, a name that evokes the reckless, dangerous mindset of their games. Running with Scissors' head and core founder is Vince Desi, possibly the most stereotypically Italian man from Brooklyn I've ever seen.
We ain't got no budget for pigeon missions. The fuck, are you kidding me?
Who was responsible for creating a provocative, shocking game with strung-out eyes bigger than its stomach that caught on with the media in the way that a lot of great things in the 90s did, through borderline slanderous headlines. You're required to shoot droves of NPCs all throughout pedestrian locations in the sleepy town of Paradise, Arizona, and it hit a bit too close to home for some. Violence in video games was a touchy topic in the 90s especially, and I've given this rundown like 4 times already, and I really don't fancy doing it again, and you already know the drill. ESRB, courtroom, you get it. What I should refresh everyone on is the specific involvement of Joe Lieberman, a US senator and vice presidential candidate who had a particular bone to pick with these games. He was the Palpatine-looking guy you see in the one famous court hearing in '93 about the eventual creation of the ESRB. He particularly loathed Postal, calling it one of the 3 worst things in American society, and digital poison, which had quite the ripple effect on the game. 2 weeks after release, tons of stores removed the game from its shelves. It was associated and even blamed for countless acts of violence around the world. There was a gigantic media firestorm that positively rocked Running with Scissors, who were not expecting this level of backlash whatsoever. They intended for Postal to be a black comedy, which is kind of ridiculous when you know what this game does, but I do kind of see where they're coming from. The people you kill have these silly little one-liners where they die. Our player character, the dude, or the demon controlling him, which is a big theory, just wait on that for now, has a ton of funny voice lines and pop culture references.
Get 'em, they're stealing all the tennis balls. Smells like chicken. Clean up on aisle 5.
The dark comedy is clearly there, but I'm hardly the only one that thinks this game is more skewed to psychological horror than comedy, which Running with Scissors and Vince Desi didn't entirely agree with. He had to defend himself, his company, and his game tooth and nail from just about every angle possible. Reviews were mixed at best, there were severe restrictions on its sales, and the US Postal Service entered a brutal legal battle with Running with Scissors that lasted for like 6-7 years, which was eventually thrown out of court for wasting everyone's time. They even got in trouble with Panasonic because Howard Stern made some kind of promotion deal that went sour. Watch the documentary, it's a wild story. Good to know that Howard Stern kept true to his trait of ruining good things. Postal was their first big game, and they did want to stir the pot a bit, but they ended up knocking it over and spilling all the spaghetti inside, which caused quite a bit of problems, but also turned a profit. He and the company compared the game to South Park. It was intended to be provocative, but mostly comedic, which is really funny looking back at it. When you make such a big media headline about banning something edgy, it's going to attract a lot of eyes, and many a gamer and or outsider ate Postal up like it was double cherry pie. It made quite the scene at 1997's E3, so much so that it sold enough to be a big success for the company. I want to say according to some investment firm or something to try and sound educated and like I know what I'm talking about, but this blurb in Wikipedia claims that they sold just shy of 50k copies by 2002, so clearly the game did alright. It sold an additional 100,000 across Europe as well, and did alright in some Asian territories. Running with Scissors had never seen such a blowout success before from all their previous Sesame Street games. Yeah, they made games for little kids prior, and then they made Postal. Postal was actually made in one of the same engines too. And if you think that's crazy, they were actually making a game based on the Steven Seagal movie before they were developing Postal. Say what you will about the man, but an Under Siege game would go crazy. With more money in their pockets and having their first real original outing validated despite all the backlash and legal troubles, they got to work on an expansion pack called Special Delivery, which added some much needed locations like a supermarket and a resort to blast up, which came out the following year. The countries that didn't ban Postal outright ended up really jiving with it, because in the year 2000, Japan got a localized version of the game that Westerners dubbed Super Postal, which included an entire Japanese dub of the game and 2 new levels specifically crafted for a Japanese audience, Osaka and Tokyo. I thought it was strange because the Japanese market is far stricter to violent, gory games than America is, but I believe that games on PC are a little easier to pass through international borders. There might be a separate rating system for those kind of games, and perhaps it isn't that shocking that a game about a man going insane from societal stress and shooting everyone in sight would appeal to a Japanese market. Postal had found an audience of loners and introverts and people who picked up what Running with Scissors put down. The thrill of the violent gameplay provided a kind of calming effect to the stressed out and the miserable, and the team is ready to cater to the people with more games. Vince Desi said in his trademark crude way, "After many kids games behind me, sticking with Postal was more like hitting puberty and breaking my virginity and just wanting more and more and more." Running with Scissors' next move was complicated. Their publisher, Ripcord Games, was none too pleased with the insane controversy, and they were already fighting off the possibility of declaring bankruptcy because all they published was Postal and some of the Spec Op games, and not the one you're thinking of. And since they saw Postal as such an astronomical risk to their brand, they told their company to hold their horses on making a sequel, which forced Running with Scissors to start a new game entirely, which they called Flesh and Wire. Or Guardian? I don't know, it's not kind of a mess. Not a lot is known about this working title, but thanks to the Lost Media Wiki, I can piece together some details. It was supposed to be a third-person science fiction game where you play as a cop dealing with this alien invasion that would have been a blend of 3D models and digitized backgrounds that used motion capture software and was planned for the PC, Dreamcast, PS2, and eventually the GameCube. I'm kind of shocked to read about this because it sounded like a huge jump for the company, from a simple isometric shooter to a 3D game where they had to physically construct the models and hire people to do all this motion capture work. Their ambition outpaced their ability, especially their financial ability. The game was being developed for at least a year, and it was supposed to come out in either late 1999 or early 2000. But Ripcord did a little thing we like to call exploding. Panasonic closed Ripcord promptly and left the team without a publisher. Negotiations broke down, and now Running with Scissors spent around $1.5 million developing this game, and now they have no publisher and no guidance. Finding another publisher would have been nothing short of a nightmare because they were the company that released Postal. Their name was dragged through the mud, and associating with them was a risky maneuver. So they decided to make a difficult choice. They canceled Flesh and Wire. Now they had spent millions of dollars all for nothing, with nothing but sand lining their pockets. They couldn't go back to making educational games, their contract with Sesame Street was long gone, and never to come back because they decided to make the funny haha shooting game. Their options were limited, and every project they tried to develop or brainstorm just seemed hopeless. But the closure of Ripcord meant that Ripcord had no right to the publishing title of Postal. So if they really wanted to, Running with Scissors could make another Postal game. And that's exactly what they did, and they decided to regret nothing. For all intents and purposes, they were an indie studio. They had to downsize just to survive as a company to develop this new game, and it was an extremely brutal process. There was a whopping total of 9 people behind this development. 9 is not a lot for anything. let alone making an entire video game. They lost a lot of big names from the first game's credits. The lack of Randy Briley's art direction is a huge shame, because that man has cooked and will probably cook again. And this was back in the early 2000s. Independent video games were barely a thing. This was before Cave Story or Yume Nikki. What, are they suddenly going to make the next Myst with the budget of a gram of pot and a bag of chips? Taking even a cursory glance at the credits, we keep seeing a familiar name pop up. Mike J. To say Mike J has been influential in the Postal series is an understatement if I've ever seen one, and I've seen some wild statements before. Mike Chief Bidet Officer Jarrett Shader had been the right-hand man of Running with Scissors basically since he met Vince Desi in the 2000s, which was only because he went to high school with Desi's son. Despite the age difference, the two are peas in a pod. They're crude, crass, brutally honest, but most importantly, genuine. Neither of them were afraid to make a nasty joke whenever they felt like it, to intentionally upset and mock things within their work.
What are you complaining about? You can piss on me in the game.
Yeah, we put our faces where our mouths are, you know what I mean?
So Mike fit like a glove and did a lot of the game himself. If you want to assign the label of a John Postal to anybody, as in a figurehead or representative of the franchise you can ascribe anything to, it's these two guys. It's less that they had one guy in charge of a specific element or task, they all had to contribute a little bit of everything given how small of a team they were, which is why Steve Wick did textures, the script, and level design at the same time. Most of the people credited for the original release besides Vince and Mike are gone now, but some have stuck around. Josh, like Leader, did most of the character modeling and some additional texture work, and he still works at the same company. So how did development go? Oh boy. The team felt like they needed a significant evolution from their previous title, so they decided to ditch the isometric third-person perspective for first-person, which introduced challenges. Kind of like introducing a bushel of bees into an unsuspecting office space. What engine did they use? Well, use is kind of a generous term. The engine they commandeered and abused was a spectacularly ghetto version of Unreal Engine, somewhere between 1.0 and 2.0, V937 as Mike J has explained. Fans dub it Unreal 1.5, and wow, is it ghastly. It's a Frankenstein's monster of things grabbed from 1 and 2, seemingly at random, held together by duct tape and faith. Mike J even admits that it really wasn't an ideal thing to build a game off of, but they kinda just put too much effort into it to switch.
But 50 maps that are all joined together to make one giant town.
How many? 15?
15, and they're all pieced together.
There isn't a ton of documentation for the on-the-ground development, so the nitty-gritty is kind of lost to me, but everyone who was present in those years of development in the early 2000s reported all the work to be excruciating. They had to learn basically everything on the fly, and they had an entirely different mindset. Postal was made with a I can do it mindset, where they had to show off their skills and have their names recognized, while the sequel had to not only be a worthy follow-up, but be more impressive than the first game, which is all kind of a tall order considering how the first game ended. How could they even continue the dude's misadventures? What really carried them throughout this difficult time was the casual working environment. Running with Scissors, since the beginning, has been a far more at ease and chill place to work at, hugely contrasting the cold managerial styles of most developers, if not being outright abusive. Running with Scissors was, and still is, just a group of guys who make games. There's an incredibly cozy environment that people always describe as they worked there. It sounds like a very relaxing environment to be. A place where Desi would have probably brought his beloved pooch, Champ, whenever he felt like it. It sounded like the kind of place where if you're stressed over a particularly nasty string of troublesome code, someone might have given you a beer and some genuine encouragement to help you out throughout the day. I really want to hammer home how much of a tight-knit community Running with Scissors would begin to instill here. Their current website is decked out with fan art, it's full of fun merchandise, and they've made quite the regular habit of hiring fans. There aren't a lot of workplace reviews for the company, but the few that do exist always praise how easygoing these people are, but recognize that it's a monumental amount of work, something Running with Scissors has kept consistent throughout its entire existence. They were very aware of the first Postal's reputation, so they decided to just embrace it and go beyond. Make it funnier, darker, more crass, take everything up to 11 and beyond that. If Postal 1 caught your gaze, Postal 2 would grab your attention, and they had a few tricks up their sleeve to keep you locked in. They decided to include some relevant topics for the time period, involvement from a particular celebrity, and several new ways to go postal and regret nothing. They not only accepted the critical reviews of the first game, they would beat them. They did finally end up finding a publisher in the form of Whiptail Interactive. Who is that? I actually don't know. Almost no information on them exists, and they don't really become relevant until later in the franchise, so don't even worry about it. So, now that we know how this game was built, how did that end up working? Well, obviously the company is still around, but I think it's high time we start playing Postal 2 for real. Let's see what all the hype is about. That's a hell of a warning if I've ever seen one. Running with Scissors was clearly not happy that some people decided to take their game way too seriously, so they made a disclaimer that it was tongue-in-cheek, but you can feel the seething contempt behind it all the same. The title screens of the Postal franchise have always been some of my favorites among all video games. They perfectly encapsulate the feel of each game, the delusional violence of the premier title, what you should be doing instead of playing that game, you know. Postal 2's title screen is some kind of fleshy hellscape with countless mundane items floating inside while an ominous but comforting ambient track plays. It's a far cry from the madness we were accustomed to, but these mundane items, milk, a package, money, all things that people are going to commonly encounter in their day-to-day lives, still evokes the societal pressures that would make someone go postal in the first place. Postal 2 is one of those games like Borderlands 2 that just got so popular and stuck around for so long that the developers update the game to advertise for upcoming stuff, which is why we have an advert for Postal 4 and the Paradise Lost option, which was a DLC expansion, I'll leave for another day. You know how Postal OG starts with one of its trademark horrifying loading screens with a grisly caption? They always featured such striking imagery and painted a remarkably grotesque photo into the dude's paranoid and delusional violent state of mind for each area. Postal 2 does something different. We instead get a long, nearly unbroken establishing shot of the town of Paradise, Arizona, looking a little different from how we remember it. And I don't just mean the fact it's all 3D now. Gone are the ostrich farms and lumber yards and cozy snow-coated homes of the original. It's all replaced with bleak cliffs and cacti and winding dry roads, dotted with simple brick houses and establishments, painting the picture of a lower-income environment for the state wordlessly. The NPCs are different. Instead of being actively hostile to you, the brief glimpses we get of them show they've all gone postal in their own special way, regardless of your presence. Police officers beating someone to death, an argument between two guys, whatever that is.
No one's impressed. Here's one for your mother!
The town's population on the signboard has been crudely scratched out and replaced with a significantly different, updated number. A hint towards how fast people are going to start dropping like flies. At the end of this panning shot is a dilapidated trailer sitting on blocks and located behind someone else's house. Returning to the games industry is the infamous Postal Dude, who makes his debut by waking up, shooting his malfunctioning AC, kicking his dog in the ribs, and being sent out to do a list of errands by his nagging wife, referred to only as the bitch. Last time I checked, the dude was a little preoccupied being crazy by the end of the first game, but not only is Paradise looking pretty alright after what happened there, the dude himself is looking a little bit more put together. His appearance is kind of ambiguous in the first game, but while he kept the shades, coat, and the ginger hair, it was far longer in most of the art and his promotional appearances. Now he's got a much shorter haircut and swapped out his red shirt for one with an alien logo, looking like a Dib membrane if he finally got revenge on all those kids at the school who didn't believe Zim was an alien. Also returning to voice the dude is Rick Hunter, and he gives an unforgettable performance.
I'll put you on a damn list. Ooh, Crotchy gets his own day. Why do I suspect the mayor owns stock in this toy company? Guess I'm just jaded and cynical. This can't be good for me, but I feel great. How convenient. I regret nothing.
Hunter's voice lines in the original are mostly just quips and short sentences, but he's given much more structured phrases to speak this time around, and his dry, sardonic, been there, done that tone mixed with a deadpan, stale delivery really crafts a voice for someone who is fed up with people's nonsense. It doesn't care if anything in his life evens out or not, he just wants to be left alone.
Come on, hurry up. I know you got minorities to oppress.
Joy and misery sound almost the same coming out of his thin lips, but not because Hunter can't emote, but because the dude is so misanthropic that he doesn't care to mask his contempt for whatever bothersome task he has ahead of him. But that isn't to say he can't have his fun at someone else's expense at the same time.
Oops, botched that one. I wonder how much his remains would go for on eBay.
It's an incredibly distinct voice that I can sort of replicate like this. Try and sound like a low, creaky door opening from the back of your throat. Then just add some sarcastic punctuation with some thinly veiled rage behind it, and you too can sound like the dude. What fucking moron designed this? I hope the bitch appreciates all the trouble I went through to get that. Did I ask for cheese? Fuck. That stuff really works. I regret nothing. Postal 1 dude was still a loner, but also completely delusional and paranoid and armed to the teeth, and viewed himself as a tortured hero against the hate plague he believed infected the town. Postal 2 dude is married and not afraid to tackle the day. He's just annoyed he has to be inconvenienced at every turn. He's still living behind some random guy's house in a trailer where he lets his dog defecate wherever it pleases, so clearly he's still an outcast, but somehow still more mentally adjusted than before. I have a lot more to say on the character, so just bear with me for now. It's ambiguous at the moment if Postal 2 is sticking to the storyline of the original, but we'll just have to wait and see, I guess. Instead of being a top-down shooter, Postal 2 is, and no I'm not kidding here, an errand simulator. Every time the dude wakes up, the map for Paradise opens up and he writes down a set of mundane, boring tasks you need to complete and circles where to find them, and you're free to complete them in any order you wish, however you wish. And I mean that in the fullest extent of the word errand. Picking up milk, going to the bank, paying a traffic violation, all those obnoxious moments in life that require you to leave your house on a day off for something you don't even like. A ton of games already have errands, but most of them tend to call them side quests. It reminds me a lot of Shenmue in ways. The way some of these mundane tasks are embraced as a part of life just felt familiar. Rio is trying to solve various mysteries while living a relatively happy life, while the dude is a misanthrope living like Dartmouth royalty. And just like Shenmue, we have an open map to explore. I did 3 separate playthroughs of this game. First was a standard one, where I just played as I normally would have and did whatever was convenient or I felt like doing on a whim. Second was a true postal run, where I chose the violent option, or law-breaking options when possible. And third was a true pacifist run, where I did not fire a single bullet and obeyed the law to the best of my ability. I'll be splicing in footage and differences between these runs as I go to compare and contrast. We're only told to pick up our paycheck, cash it, and grab some milk. That's it. The rest is up to you. Postal 2 employs minimal tutorials, with occasional hints or instructions appearing in the top left corner of the screen for some tasks, but can be disabled in the menu. You're given an incredible amount of freedom right from the start, which allows you to see that Postal 2 is a masterpiece in the sandbox genre. Video game genres seem to switch definitions every decade or so. I remember sandbox games being entries like Infamous and Prototype when I was a kid, while search for that term now gets games like Garry's Mod and Minecraft. In retrospect, I probably had a warped definition of the term because of the people I knew growing up, but Postal 2 combines the map and civilian drama of GTA with the absurd arsenal of abilities and weaponry from a series like Infamous. Kind of. You have one of the roomiest coats of all time because you can hold 9, technically 10 different weapon slots that can all be holstered and brought out with the F key, and selected with the mouse wheel or corresponding number key. Melee, pistols, shotguns, rifles, gas/fire, small and large throwables, rifles, 2 kinds of launchers, and that nebulous other category that occupies the 0 key. There's a wild blend of household tools, traditional game weaponry, and just what the hell ever that would make the later Saints Row games green with envy, and nobody wants to be purple and green. Outrageous doesn't even begin to describe what you can do to the not-so-innocent people of Paradise. You can victimize just about everyone you ever could want in a town and get the cops on your tail, or you can just leave them alone. I'll hold off describing specific weapons for now because you have to find them as you play. sometimes in specific areas, or from enemies, or just given at a right time. Like the outhouse, which holds your first melee weapon and Oh, yeah, crack pipes are our main way of restoring health, and it's amazing. Our inventory can be accessed with the tab key, and it's split into health, animals, errand, and other. Most of these items can be assigned with our use key to activate its intended effect, which is usually being consumed in some context-specific way. Health is a no-brainer, as much as smoking crack is a no-brainer at least. Errands are just quest items, others mainly for the map, money, and stat list, and animal is... I'll get to it. Point is, you have roomy pockets, and there is a ton of stuff lining them. You'll see. I keep saying that, you will see. Trust me. Do you trust me? The map is your best friend in the game, because Paradise can definitely be confusing to navigate the first time around. Closed roads are indicated by being grayed out, leaving you to navigate the rest of the scorching hot Arizona concrete jungle by your lonesome. How does the dude wear a black trench coat in Arizona during the summer months without drowning in his own sweat? I don't have much in my pockets other than 20 bucks, a shovel, and crack. It's the American dream as far as I'm concerned, and now I've got to leave it by the wayside because the closest errand to our house is buying some goat milk from the local all-American store, the Lucky Ganesh. When was this game made again? Oh yeah. A lot of people describe Postal 2 as politically incorrect, and they really mean that with their whole chests. Most people's first encounter with this game is getting to embody an American annoyed with a foreigner store that clashes with traditional American values. The store reportedly smells bad, it's run by a rude guy named Habib, and there are tons of references to food and generally pricklier parts of Middle Eastern culture that were in the crossfire in the early 2000s for reasons I'm sure I don't need to explain.
Did someone slaughter a goat in here? No, seriously, I want to know.
The whole store is a weird mishmash of Middle Eastern and Indian culture presented as deeply intrusive to Paradise and its residents, like a parasite leeching into town. It's filled with tons of stereotypes about Islamic terrorists, but the place is named and fashioned after a Hindu god, Ganesh. Postal 2 is proud to be ignorant and showcase either the lack of understanding or caring for these cultures in a way that's deliberately offensive, but also tongue-in-cheek. Believe me, these are hardly the only cultures and nations mocked, so some of the xenophobia feels natural that way. Never thought I'd say that, but there's a first for everything. But Postal as a franchise operates entirely through jokes so absurd that they really struggle to feel like targeted harassment or genuine hatred or disdain. I never got the impression that anyone on the development staff genuinely loathed a specific group or ethnicity. They just wanted to poke fun at whatever was topical. And at least viewing the game retrospectively, it was a bold move. Plenty of mature-rated titles in the 2000s did this, some of this way crazier, but you'd be hard-pressed to find anything like this now because people are a lot more sensitive to this kind of humor, and shock jock jokes are a lot harder to slide through censors now. When was the last big game that was xenophobic as a joke? And I don't mean that in like an accusatory way of someone who's unemployed complaining about a non-issue. I mean like a AAA game, or even AA, that intentionally made fun of someone else's culture. Maybe that style of humor will come back and leave the harder swing into progressivism in the dust, but who am I to say? It really cements how much of a time capsule Postal 2 is to a different era, when people weren't afraid to be controversial as much. Really, no one cares about Habib's store or how offensive it is, because it's Postal 2. It is intentionally juvenile and crass for that sake alone. It isn't taking itself seriously even remotely, and that's advertised everywhere. I thought it was pretty funny personally. I live in Canada, I have to deal with this all the time. Tangent aside, we can pick up our goat's milk, the jihad goat's milk that is, and we get to check off an item on our list. We're told to pay for our milk, or not. The main game mechanic of the errand simulator has revealed its hand. We can either A, get our milk by waiting in line and paying $5 to the clerk, or B, steal it and face consequences. Being a model citizen is made intentionally obnoxious or lengthy because there's a long line of people in front of you blocking your payment, and you have to wait. You can't cut in front of the line. Well, there's ways around it that are intentional and not intentional, but you're supposed to wait in line. Wasting your time and being inconvenienced is there by design. and it's masterfully woven into the themes of going postal. Postal 1 had the pressure of society largely as a thematic backdrop, but Postal 2 allows you to experience it firsthand. There's no end to the nonsense. You'll have to wait in line, go through detours, and generally be put in all sorts of tedious, uncomfortable situations. There's some debate on how much a game should intentionally frustrate a player, but as it stands now, Postal 2 is able to bug you without being too egregious. It's not unreasonable to expect someone to just pull out their phone for 3 minutes to wait in line. And this video is being made in 2025. People are way more impatient now than they were in 2003. It strikes the kind of narrative frustration of having to deal with all the little snags in a boring life, but doesn't feel like too much of an ordeal to wait through, for the most part. There are definitely tasks that are wildly annoying comparatively to do as the good guy, but some tasks where going postal is so easy and convenient that the downsides hardly exist at all. But what if we don't pay for our milk? We're forced into a combat encounter and meant to defend ourselves by any means necessary. How difficult each combat encounter is depends on your weaponry, healing items, and the difficulty. Obviously, you're going to need strong weapons and ways to heal yourself to succeed, and higher difficulties often modify your enemy's pool of weaponry from simple pistols and shotguns to rocket launchers. Civilians aren't always armed, but each rung up on the difficulty makes it so a higher percentage of them will attack you when provoked. I was playing on normal difficulty for the sake of recording, so I didn't see many rocket launchers until the end, but if you want a challenge, the vanilla game's highest difficulty is Heston World, named after famous Hollywood actor and tough guy Charlton Heston. I would also like to point out that the easiest mode of difficulty, that's so easy that no one except yourself is armed, is called Lieber mode, named after Joe Lieberman, who so infamously loathed Postal, which is a bit of god-tier trolling that I will always commend. What going postal in Lucky Ganesh means that you have to kill the store owner and either fight or evade your way through the employee entrance, which is actually a house/terrorist cell, full of armed people ready to kill you. You will probably die if you start trouble because chances are all you'll have on you is that terrible shovel weapon, and maybe a pistol if you've gone exploring prior. Weapons can be picked up from corpses, but also cleverly hidden around the map. Oh, game crashed. For now, I chose to be a pacifist and pick up my milk and make my way to work to pick up the paycheck. It's kind of weird to imagine the dude having a job willingly and associating with people, but how exactly can you get sick of society if you didn't participate in it at least sometimes? He has a car, non-functional, but he still has one, and a driver's license presumably to go with it. He's not a caveman totally isolated, just a bitter misanthrope. That is an important distinction for his character. I didn't know how to segue this mechanic properly into the script, so here's how many times I kicked open doors in my playthrough. Kicking is a fundamental Postal 2 mechanic, one of its most iconic, by far. Pressing Q launches one of your boots forward, and it's incredibly multifaceted. For one, it immediately opens unlocked doors, which is almost all of them in the whole game, and deals a varying amount of damage depending on your stance, but not enough to really be considered a good weapon. A standing kick is more of a distraction tool than a weapon. A crouching kick will minimize the distance of kicked objects, while a jumping kick maximizes it. Kicking hitboxes are incredibly janky, so I don't actually recommend you use it like that, but what it can do for some reason is render thrown grenades inert and deflect enemy rockets if your timing is good, which is ridiculous, but also ridiculously satisfying. It can also be used with your weapons, so you can settle comfortably into a unique synergy of shooting and stopping to kick away a grenade or missile if you're quick enough without it ever feeling too stressful to pull off. The kick has become a core part of the Postal dude's identity, and it's not hard to see why. It's a hilariously crass utility tool, but it's also perfectly in character to do as a violent misanthrope. Just kick someone in the ribs for fun. What's not to love? What, you think it isn't fun kicking interactable objects and severed heads down the road like cans? Well, you're wrong, because it is fun. Oh, hi there, Mr. Coleman. I'll circle back to that. We have to head to our job at running with scissors? Huh? Oh, yeah. Running with scissors self-insert in this game with a boldness I don't think I've ever seen. I believe they technically existed prior in the first game because you can see them in one of the levels, I'm not sure if I even mentioned that in my video at the time, but there's no mistaking it now. We can physically meet game versions of Mike J and Vince Desi in their riots. So the Postal dude, their creation, works for the company that made him. Like, Running with Scissors exists as a separate entity in universe. Man, that is a trip. I'd make a Kamaitachi no Yoru reference, but like 3 people would understand what I'm talking about. What's even weirder is that we don't actually know what the dude does at the company. I really struggle to imagine this guy's a programmer. No, actually, I can perfectly picture that. He has a level of detachment and cynicism only found in jaded programmers and IT guys.
How'd you like it if somebody called you a lunatic?
This guy spent a lot of time learning C# in college. I can smell it. Running with Scissors designed Running with Scissors office in a way that blended real-life fact to whatever bits of toilet humor they had in the mind. Mike J's office is in the bathroom, but they also have arcade cabinets everywhere, a reference to how their original office contained the arcade game Robotron 2084, which is actually the game that helped inspire the original Postal. Maybe I'll have to come back to the year 2084 to review that game, but don't hold me to it. I'll hopefully be retired on a farm with my wife and grandkids by then. Before we can even enter the building, we're swamped with protesters belonging to the Parents for Decency group with their obnoxious chants and signs.
Bad, they make you mad. Games are bad, they make you mad. Games are bad, they make you mad.
There were protesters in the first game, but now they're front and center. There are a ton of identical hate groups doing this now because of how angry people got after the first game, and now Running with Scissors wants to tell you just how they think of them. You can kill them if you want, but I ignored them and went to pick up my paycheck from Vince Desi. Well, we lost our job after a single day, but our task is completed regardless. We can kill Desi if we want to, but we might want to keep him around because as soon as you touch that check, the Parents for Decency start charging the building to kill everyone inside, and the good folks at Running with Scissors are some of the only NPCs to defend you at gunpoint in a pinch. Postal 2 will often throw you to the wolves to other people going postal, and you're free to engage them in combat or leave outright. We can claw our way out of the building and shoot everyone in sight, or just eat the bullets and walk past the front door, or escape to the back and evade a smaller percentage of enemies. Our next loading zone informs us that any NPC belonging to that specific group we have a problem with now will attack on sight, and they will be a constant threat throughout the game going forward. All we have to do now is travel all the way to the bank, the Fee of America. By this sign, thou shalt conquer. Non-zero chance that Latin phrase was chosen because it had the word Winkiz in it and it looks kind of like Vince. Oh, game crashed. We've most likely had our encounters with peace and violence prior to this point. It's the furthest errand from the player's starting point, and makes for an excellent tutorial to showcase this game's sandbox environments and choices. We can wait in line to cash our check, or just walk into the vault. The trigger for this errand is just obtaining money from the bank. We don't even need the check in our inventory to break and take the money. You only needed to complete the task peacefully. Even if you are law-abiding, a group of bank robbers come to hold the place up after you cash it, but breaking in obviously alerts the police to arrest and kill you. I always choose to rob the bank because there's a very easy way to get inside from the roof, but there's also a secret passageway that leads out from the vault room. Postal 2 has quite a bit of little secret areas and nooks to hide and find powerful weaponry in, but there is a massive problem with that comes up later in the week. Oh yeah, I also picked up 9 cats today. There are cats running around everywhere you can pick up if you walk or crouch to them. What did they do? You'll see. Don't worry about it. Once we've completed all of our tasks, the next loading zone will instantly play a cutscene of the dude coming home and talking to his wife, which starts our next day. If you couldn't tell by the days of the week gimmick, this is the core gameplay loop of Postal 2. Do a series of errands each day from Monday to Friday, with the list gradually progressing and becoming more difficult as the week goes on. Monday was a phenomenal introduction to having the ability to choose between being violent and peaceful, and how to deal with what the game has to throw at you. And now we're given even more opportunity to explore the town because new routes have opened up, which should gracefully transition into me talking about how Paradise is laid out. In case you haven't noticed, okay, who am I kidding? Of course you've noticed how greasy this town is. It's absurd. Remember how someone at Running with Scissors said that Paradise was 15 small maps stitched to make one big one? They weren't kidding. Basically every block or section of town is broken up by a loading zone. It says so in every underpass, and the load times for these used to be diabolical. I was too busy being 2 years old in 2003, but reports of the original disc version's load times are between 30 seconds to over a full minute of just waiting. And you are regularly forced to wait between each loading zone and reload after every death. And if anything's gonna make you go Postal, that'll do it. Patches in the Steam version and playing the game on an SSD drastically fix this, but damn does that sound cumbersome. Most places usually have more than one way to find them, so roadblocks are only found in the ways of closed roads in the earlier days, or dead ends in the far reaches of town near the compound and whatnot. There are plenty of signs and underpasses directing us where to go, but I'm directionally challenged, so my early hours of the game are filled with, where do I go? Fuck, oh my god. So for that reason, I'll leave it up to you to judge if Paradise is well designed, but I can say with confidence that it's at least got some interesting environments. Maybe I'm just easily marveled at the Arizona environment, but what looks bleak and desolate to other people is charmingly foreign and intriguing to me. I like how dusty everything looks, the cacti, the sweltering heat environment, it's wonderful. It's not lost on me what the town's name means too. Paradise is obviously ironic, but naturally there's biblical symbolism present. A lot of the residents of this town have oddly sophisticated paintings of scenes from the Bible on display. Let me highlight some of the more interesting aspects of the game, like the elephant ranch where the owner Earl likes to kill the precious creatures and sell them as elephant steaks, which you can buy if you choose to do so. It's an empty stadium with 3 elephants trotting around, and of course, you can kill them. It's basically the only thing I felt bad about killing in this game. How about the suburbs, accessible near the end of the game, where you can find pit bulls with AIDS, and navigate this insane concrete labyrinth that reminds me of my own town. Houses are precariously built on hills and unstable land. There's even this creepy secret shrine someone blocked off with burnt corpses being offered to a severed cow head. Ugh. What about the insane asylum? The redundant asylum is where the people too crazy for normal Paradise are locked up in, and you might be able to see why. There's clearly a secret plot to scoop out people's pineal glands for world domination or something. Nothing to be worried about. The entire game is full of minor locations that serve no narrative importance whatsoever, but are fascinating to explore and offer little glimpses into the minds of the people who live in this crazy town. I kinda wish my city had an insane asylum. I've just about had it with tweakers. This is such a nice environment, a really knockout portrayal of a psychotic neighborhood within an impoverished American town. I keep expecting to find the Collier house at some point. There are 2 different arcade spots in town, and there's a bit of a story behind this one. Bastard Fish, which I believe is a retexture of another game called, Flag Hunter. Let's go with that. It was an early 2000s game, what'd you expect? I have a lot more to say about this game in future Postal 2 videos, but why is it now called Bastard Fish? Well, it was retextured almost immediately with the release of the first expansion for the game that came out less than a year later, which is a very rare instance of the company feeling they went too far with being offensive, which does feel a little toothless considering every other offensive aspect of the game. There is an argument to be made for what is too far, or which groups are immune from the game's humor for whatever reason, but it is a very minor footnote in the game that it has a bit more relevancy with some of the expansions. Postal 2 forgoes more traditional background music in exchange for very subdued ambience. Take a listen. For as much as a banger the OG game had for a soundtrack during its loading screens, it kept the primary gameplay quiet and restrained. And the sequel took this up to 11. The electrical buzzing inside building interiors, the animals and bugs on the outside, and the occasional menacing hum in the game's lonelier locations all round things out to make a diegetic and fitting ambient soundtrack that feels just unsettling enough to suggest a greater chaos beneath the peaceful surface. Of course, we can't forget about Matt Muzak. can we? Every time you pull up your map, this little ditty plays, and it's easily the game's, probably the franchise's, most iconic soundtrack despite its simplicity. It's an incredibly basic track that some would argue goes against the violent mayhem you can commit, but the clash between its gentle notes and all the fire and bullet storms you can spit out makes it work all the more. It's the kind of music you associate with the wonky NPC behavior, which there is a ton of. Just place the track on any video of someone acting erratically, and you'll get it. It's like the Oblivion NPC meme, but 3 years its senior. Praising Postal 2 as a soundtrack is kind of odd because so much of it is incredibly subtle ambience that melts away under the stress of bullets and gunfire, but it does a lot to really sell the chaos of the environments you're in. Postal 2 ambience isn't a topic most people discuss unless you're hyper-fixated on the game, or Russian, but I really do believe it stands in the same conversation as games like Silent Hill 2 in terms of perfectly encapsulating its environment. You get more and more comfortable and familiar with navigating Paradise the more you play. More roads open up, you'll learn more shortcuts, which almost always has a reward in the form of a weapon or health at the end. But as much as I love this town, I dearly miss the delusional vibes of the first game. But had they kept with them, it might have turned out stale eventually, so I understand why they felt the need to deviate so harshly. The darker tone of the original wasn't outright abandoned, it comes up in spurts throughout the franchise, but the black comedy tone has been far more emphasized, and we have to live with it. Our tasks for Tuesday are quite the ordeal. Confess our sins at the church, return a library book, get Gary Coleman's autograph, and get signatures for our petition. The petition is for some reason the game's biggest errand highlight. It's borderline just as famous as the game itself. If you haven't heard of Postal 2, you might have seen a clip of him asking NPCs to sign his petition, if not seen it through fan-made animation. The petition is to make whiny congressmen play Postal 2, which is actually not a bad idea, because if they just did that, they would figure out the game is entirely beatable without firing a single bullet or killing anyone at all. The game's most iconic twist is that you never have to. You can be a regular Joe and avoid the combat. But I do take issue with the slogan of "it's only as violent as you are" and how that philosophy is implemented. Because people are constantly shooting at you no matter what, so you can be as violent as you want, but the world is violent around you irregardless of your choice sometimes. I know the game was designed like that to get back at annoying protesters, and it is really funny and even insightful, and while I think it's a rockstar premise, some implementations of the idea struggle pretty hard. You have to get 8 NPCs to sign this petition, and it doesn't matter who does it. Random civilians, whoever. You get 3 shots to make them do it, and I think it's kind of random chance on if they do it or not. By the 3rd demand, they either sign it, run away in fear, or attack you, so good luck. It's a definite speedrun breaker, which is really funny because the Postal 2 speedrunning community is surprisingly vibrant and competitive. But now I think I have to bring up the NPCs because it's a mess. The townspeople of Paradise are absolutely out of their mind, head to toe.
Finally, it's about time you showed up. Sorry I'm late. Somebody blew up my car.
I don't like the look of
That's the
him.
one!
Get the hell out of here, you lunatic!
Now flowers will grow.
They're somehow able to wonderfully represent all the stupid, annoying traits strangers have, like refusing to answer their cell phones or gradually just getting in your way and being an asshole. They react so violently to almost anything, often pulling out guns and attacking you or each other on a whim. They flip between being content and furious on a dime, which you can manipulate in very funny ways. It's so easy to scare them and send them into a frenzy. You have to treat them like animals. They make a lot more sense if you treat them like shotgun-armed bunnies anyways. By design, these people are crazy, but they are incredibly easy to manipulate by doing whatever. Random debris, violence happening somewhere nearby, basically whatever you can think of to distract them, and your arsenal will work. Inconsistently, at least. They are really inconsistent, but that's part of the charm. There were almost no 2 scenarios of interacting with them alike, and through the blend of ridiculous AI and intentional goofiness, I would argue it matches the real-life unpredictability of dealing with annoying people around you. Going postal is way easier for them than it is for you. The premise of the first game is kind of flipped on its head, because You aren't special. Everyone has a breaking point, and some people are easily broken by having to wait in line for 5 minutes. Just look at the way they're animated. Limbs barely look proportional, everyone runs like they're wearing clown shoes. These people are homunculi that have crawled from hell and insist they receive a 5-finger discount on everything in life. Voices hardly ever match up, tones are pitch shifted. These are uncanny creatures. There are various types of NPCs too, townsfolk, Islamic terrorists, all sorts of people belonging to various creeds and jobs, and law enforcement who act very differently. It wouldn't be a sandbox without cops, and naturally breaking the law or just pissing them off by having your fly unzipped or bumping into them will increase notoriety. And if they catch you, you go to jail, which you have to escape from by setting off a match in the jail cell. You get placed in cells that are progressively tougher and tougher to break out of the more you're caught, but you can always escape. Everything confiscated from you is in a dedicated room, so you don't have to worry about losing progress with gathering weapons and money and whatnot. It's incredibly easy to evade police because they only typically have pistols and shotguns, but any contact within their nebulous aggression range will increase your notoriety and they'll give chase. They're on about the same level as Watch Dogs 1 police, where if you just hide in a corner for a minute, they'll go away and you'll be fine. Things will ramp up, but don't worry about it for now. They really are around every corner, ensuring the player doesn't have total free reign to murder people as they please. But these guys are total chumps, and can be neatly ignored if you have the right health. Well, the least I can do is mess with the marching band, as is Postal tradition.
Slow roasted goodness.
I got some signatures and remembered I needed to return Catch Her in the Rye to the library. So I took my example of the average woman's literature past the anti-literacy protesters to this shockingly ornate library. I didn't think Paradise was literate enough to need a library, but clearly the people who need it are using it. Library cards can get you far, folks. This whole place is a fusion of Greco-Roman marble and modern sensibilities, with each flat JPEG texture representing a collection of books that's stunningly well maintained and organized. It might be the ritziest place in all of Paradise. All we have to do here is find the return slot. Please do not wait in that line, it is a complete waste of time, and I think it was added as a joke just to mess with players. And clumsily throw it into the slot with X. X throws your usable items, and for some reason you can throw and outright lose required items. But there's always a way to get them back on the same day. But some of these items can't be thrown at all, so I really don't understand why some can and can't. As soon as that book is returned and the errand is checked off, the protesters light the library on fire and turn it into a scorching parkour section with some minor combat. For all I've praised Postal 2 for, its parkour will not be part of that. The dude can barely jump to save his life. It's so short and stubby and janky, everything feels too tall for him. So imagine a stubby jump being the only thing you have to carry yourself to victory as you zigzag through burning pillars, some of which are instant kills. There are multiple of these parkour segments, and believe me, the worst ones have yet to come. At least if you get caught on fire, you can pee on yourself to put it out. Oh yeah, pee. In addition to the kick, piss is also a core Postal Dude mechanic. I have the button assigned to Z, and it holsters your weapon to let out a controllable arc of piss. What purpose does it serve? Other than being hilarious? It's another distraction tool. Pissing on an NPC can distract them and prevent them from killing you. You have to arc it up to an NPC's mouth, which will cause them to be stunned and eventually puke, leaving them wide open, which is absolutely disgusting. God. Primal Rage has Postal 2 beat for quite some time to use P as a weapon, but Postal 2 is undoubtedly the most famous game to feature it. My search history was so wrecked by researching this man. I think you can pee on people in crypt worlds? I don't know.
That's the ticket.
P can also put out fires, which happens all the time in this game, be it from ones you start or weird environmental ones. I think I'm just an idiot because I could barely manage to put out fires with urine, but if the dude is on fire, just aim the urine up in the air and he'll be instantly extinguished. I mean, you can do that without him being on fire to piss in his own mouth if you so desire. It has a recharging meter starting at 20, and if it's 0, you can't pee. In the higher difficulties, peeing is basically compulsory not to be gunned down, so you're gonna have to learn how to do the fickle art of the golden shower if you want to survive. Having your fly unzipped gets you in trouble with the cops and causes non-aggressive NPCs to laugh at you. It's a bold move to have it be canon that the Postal dude is not packing.
Yeah. Microscope.
It's a borderline immersive sim mechanic to have pee be this in-depth. It even shows up as a big censored circle on your character model. I miss when games had mirrors that actually reflected the character models. Nobody wants to do it anymore, they just can't figure it out. Also, check out what happens when you take a leak in any sizable body of water. I think this was a glitch inside of the already baffling water physics they just decided to keep because it was awesome. But it also raises the question of why water is even in the game. It's entirely aesthetic. There's no swimming mechanic, I think. I'd say it's useful to snuff out flames if you're on fire, but urine already does that job. I actually like that water is useless in this game. It really sells the fact that Paradise is a nasty town by having these weird pits of shallow water full of whatever. Also, this game has fall damage and it sucks and I hate it and I wish it wasn't here. I eventually got out of the burning library, but now it's closed off forever, and just a day after fire inspection. The book protesters now want us dead, and we've got the mall and the church next. Paradise Mall is a truly sprawling environment filled with unique stores, I'll say, and a thrillingly accurate depiction of a failing mall in a dead-end town. Everything from the droning, repetitive music that plays, the floors and walls being obviously unfinished, stores closed and never to be replaced, a really unhelpful map, absolutely baffling advertisements. This whole place feels like a twisted nostalgia trip for me in the most discomforting way. The mall is split between two different loading zones, the east and west wings, which contain various stores. Some aren't important, while others you can buy an assortment of things that are incredibly useful, like ammunition, body armor, whatever. Even some quest items are sold here. There are an unusual amount of cripplingly lonely places tucked away here, or stores that have yet to be staffed. I had never felt Postal 2 was an especially off-putting game, but something about the empty mall sections where there's no music and no people makes me feel soul-crushing isolation. Like if I visit this mall at the wrong time, I'll never see the light of day again. I swear, I've been to a mall like this before. I've seen this place before. It's like visiting the back rooms. It scratches at the back of my mind and hits triggers of nostalgia and loneliness and being afraid of the world in a way only a child can be. It feels like anything can happen here, and believe me, things do indeed happen here. After gathering the courage to leave, I remember what I actually have to do here. Get a signed copy of Gary Coleman's book. And there he is! The real Gary Coleman, voice and all.
Yeah, sure it is.
Who's Gary Coleman? I didn't know. I got the blues one day and decided to dedicate an afternoon into his life, and it was certainly a rabbit hole. He led a difficult, troubled life, balancing the stress of being a child actor on the sitcom Different Strokes, and dealing with his congestive kidney disease, which affected the growth of his entire body, giving him an incredibly distinct appearance in adulthood. His character he played on Different Strokes, Arnold, was one of two boys from Harlem adopted by the prestigious Mr. Drummond. The show was about how different the characters were depending on which part of New York they were from, hence the name. His catchphrase was easily one of the most iconic in sitcom history. From what I gathered, the show has a bit of a mixed reputation nowadays, but is still mostly fondly remembered. Child actors usually have a pretty rough time in the entertainment industry once they grow up, and Coleman's already troubled life really didn't help his career. He went through countless legal battles and public meltdowns, which led to him never really landing another successful role after his national TV debut. Nevertheless, Running with Scissors knew who the man was because of that outing, and his frequent run-ins with the law and the news. And one day while they were sitting around the office, they just suggested, what if we got Gary Coleman in the game? Perhaps it was his troubled life and media infamy that drew their eyes, seeing it as relatable, or perhaps they were just fans of the show, or it could be both. What we do know is that not only did Coleman agree to be part of the game, he went all in. This wasn't a simple voicing his likeness act. He was do or die on advertising the game, showing up to E3 and everything. There's recorded footage of him playing games and having a baller time with it.
Now, people are just so pent up and frustrated and angry, and they have no way to release that tension. So this is a good way to do it. Oh, hello, kitty.
Not many games I can think of where you can viciously murder the celebrity cameo, but Coleman's likeness is somehow more unhinged than most of Paradise's townfolk. He has such a high health bar and carries a nearly infinite supply of grenades and rifle ammo, so if you choose to kill him, taking him down is quite the ordeal. I was going to stand in line patiently, but someone pulled out a gun for genuinely no reason and just started shooting people. All we need is that book signed, and that can only be obtained by being patient and getting one from Coleman, or killing one of the NPCs, or Coleman himself. I was playing with Mike J's severed head and my game crashed, but I was able to obtain 2 copies from people's corpses from that previous Postal incident. If you choose to wait and get the book in a goody two-shoes way, the police come in to try and arrest Coleman for an outstanding warrant, and people end up shooting each other and dying anyways, so you really have no choice but to be a bystander of violence. Given Coleman's rocky history with the law, it really is wild that Running with Scissors depicted him like this, but it's way funnier that he's so unhinged.
Go back to the donut convention, I ain't going nowhere.
I love the running gag that the dude doesn't even remember what show Coleman is from.
Ooh, Gary's in town. I used to love what's happening. Hello, Mr. Coleman. I love facts of life.
Of course, there is an elephant in the room. Coleman passed away in 2010, but it wouldn't be the end of his inclusion in the Postal franchise. In fact, it only got crazier from here, but that's for the future. Let's just enjoy what we have when we have it, because we'll never know when it's too late to be in the moment. We've got to take a long and difficult journey all the way to the town's Catholic church, which is blocked off by a series of shipping containers. Welcome to Our Lady of Insatiable Avarice, where things are pretty standard procedure. Wait in line or kill the priest, you know the drill. All the jokes here are exactly what you'd expect, for the most part, but instead what interests me is this. Why exactly does the dude go to confession? He doesn't seem earnestly remorseful for anything. I'd argue it's out of character for him to care about that.
Bless me, Father, for I have really sinned. Really? I'm not kidding here. Big sinner. Yep.
But he still does confession at the Catholic Church. Probably out of some dry sense of obligation. In a lot of promotional ads, the dude has a Christian cross woven into his jacket. He's not exactly what people would call a good Christian, but I don't think anyone would argue this guy doesn't give off relapsed Catholic vibes in some way. I want to analyze him a bit more to try and build a psychological profile for this maladjusted ginger trainwreck American. His backstory is ambiguous. Setting aside everything we know about Postal 1, which is crazy to say, but roll with me, he lives with his nagging wife in a trailer in some guy's backyard. The dude seems perfectly content with coasting in life, but he always carries that sardonic devil-may-care attitude, but in a way that suggests he might have been a more earnest man in the past. What exactly happened to him? Well, he does live in a society. His life is left blank because you can easily theorize that it was one particular thing that made him this way, or just a million little things. It doesn't really matter. He's married, but has nothing but contempt for his wife, which begs the question why the two were even together in the first place. The dude seems like one of those guys who never really wanted to settle down and have kids. I mean, would you trust this guy to be a dad? He doesn't value life whatsoever, not even his own. All injuries, regardless if they're his or he's done something to someone else, he treats with the same sardonic disdain.
Now that's what I call welfare reform. Ooh, mommy.
The only living thing he seems to value whatsoever is his dog, Champ, which he doesn't raise properly. And yes, his dog is named Champ like Desi's dog is named Champ. That was intentional. Champ becomes a much more important figure later on in the franchise, but for now, he's just the dude's mistrained dog that he kicked in the ribs in the game's intro. But he at least cares enough about him to not starve him to death, which is a low bar, but indeed a bar. Look at the music he listens to. Running with Scissors constantly puts these what's playing on the dude's music player posts where they list around 5 songs he has in his rotation. And there's some pretty clear favoritism for alternative rock and nu metal, which is pretty tight if I do say so myself.
The Postal Dude's favorite band is Nickelback.
500 cigarettes.
Well, you can't get more misanthropic than outright admitting publicly that you like Nickelback. He's addicted to crack in a way that everyone was addicted to crack in edgy early 2000s works. If Postal 2 was made in the 2020s, the health pipe would be a vape pen, and he'd be way more insufferable. He has some sense of obligation to do things, because despite having zero respect for the police, or law enforcement, or life, or his wife, or himself, or the environment, he's seemingly powerless to say no to some of these things. But why is he so stable? Well, stable is kind of a bold choice of word there, but compared to being completely insane, what happened? Well, there are some details you can definitely extrapolate on, but just notice how less attached to society he is. The more isolated the dude is, the happier he is throughout the franchise. He may have been evicted in the start of the first game, but being a renter and living in a neighborhood was his mental low point. While living in a trailer, he's still miserable and callous and violent, but at least he isn't experiencing intense delusions, at least not yet. The dude is a diverse character in that he allows you to play as the most unrepresented group. Poor white people. I'm serious too, playing a trailer trash character is not super common. There are hicks and even redneck protagonists, but this drug-addicted misfit who lives in a trailer is a really specific type of guy that I don't often see represented through player characters, and that's really neat. Running with Scissors viewed the dude in a more tragic sense, comparing him to other troubled and maligned characters with mean streaks like John Rambo in First Blood and William Foster in Falling Down. You've seen this character archetype before, a loner who is constantly bothered by the people and world around him, which will often make him commit violent acts in one way or another. Most of what makes this character work is a careful acknowledgement that they are indeed at least a little unhinged and can do terrible things, but you're supposed to at least empathize with why it all happened. Some of these guys are a little kookier than others, but the general vibe is that anyone can become a taxi driver or John Rambo. These characters are given occupations and backstories that forces them to interact with people at their worst. They can often be involved with the military. The green jacket is a telltale sign of seeing action and becoming jaded to human connections. If we view the dude through the lens of someone like Travis Bickle, his character does make a lot more sense. The key difference here is that the dude isn't really a sympathetic character, and you're not supposed to take him fully seriously. You're usually supposed to pity these movie characters at the beginning, but the dude's lack of a concrete backstory or emotional core allows you to leave any hang-ups about seeing this guy viciously kill people at the door. Running with Scissors uses the framework of him being a troubled hero to make you understand what kind of man he is, but you aren't required to empathize with him as an individual, but with all the nonsense he has to deal with. There are plenty of sardonic and edgy protagonists out there in various films and games, but the dude stands out so much because I truly believe Running with Scissors understands why people love that character archetype so much and cuts out all the fat, letting you project whatever frustrations you have onto him without it ever getting in the way of the game itself. There are countless fan interpretations or headcanons of what his life is or was like, which is irrefutable proof that his intended purpose succeeded. The dude really is one of the most varied and malleable characters in the entire gaming medium. Seeing him beside Super Mario and Cartoon Horse fan art doesn't raise any suspicion at all because he's just that well-rounded. You can see the dude in the Postal franchise basically anywhere and you probably wouldn't even bat an eye. You would probably just quietly accept it, which is a great sign for being a good character. He just tapped into part of the collective unconscious so well that he became a small gaming icon. He's a worldwide figure that extends past English-speaking communities. Eastern Europe especially cherishes the games, and Japan had a Postal phase we've already discussed. Regardless of the outcome at the church, Islamic terrorists begin to attack the church for being infidels.
Reclaim this holy land in the name of Allah! Prepare to die, infidels!
And you have another combat sequence you can choose to engage in, though I would like to point out that despite automatically targeting you, the terrorists don't actually have anything against you personally because they don't show up on the map as a group of interest. It's nice of them. God, that's a hard day to spell. Who spelled it like that? Fucking moron. The day after Tuesday and before Thursday, we have to piss in our dad's grave, because no maladjusted sociopath's life is complete without daddy issues, grab a Christmas tree in this summer, and go vote for our general election, because we really care. All the candidates really care too, because the ballots are being hosted by the local Chinese place, Caucasian, which serves all manner of delicious dishes. Voting is perhaps the truest errand in the game, because there's no other way to approach it than to just walk up to the stand. Naturally, this is based on a real form from the 2000 presidential election, specifically this one from Palm Beach County in Florida, because of course it's from Florida. I looked into it for a little bit. There was like a whole recount drama thing because of Florida's electoral college importance, and I don't know, American voting is weird. You tell me who this vote is counting for. I'm more of a prostitution party voter myself, but the combo of the GIMP and Obama Bin Smith have really started to sway me. I like how Joe Lieberman, Bin Laden, and Steven Seagal are the only real people to get on this form. Really ties the politics of America together. There's something deeply that intimately bothers me about this game, and it's the fact that it's completely broken top to bottom. How many times have I mentioned the fact the game has crashed on me? The absolute worst aspect of this game being built on the worst version of Unreal fucking humanly possible is that it is more unstable than the fucking demon core in every loading zone. It's a chance of just closing the goddamn game. You thought New Vegas was bad for that? Well, it is. But Postal 2 is even worse. Considerably. Nearly anything in the game will result in a crash. Having too much fun going postal? Crash. Loading zone? Crash. Do nothing at all? Crash. But that isn't to say all glitches in this game are bad. Far from it. Remember the water physics? How about the janky ragdolls? What about the fact that if you get stuck on something or enter blue hell, the game just teleports you to the nearest safe area and tells you not to do it again? A core part of Postal 2's identity is its unstable, buggy nature, but I would like to establish a strong difference between a non-intrusive bug that adds charm and character to the game, between ones that are genuinely awful to experience and seriously hamper it. NPC's erratic behavior, and that time I was playing some DLC and my shotgun gradually shot more and more shells with each click to the point it would lag the hell out of my game for no reason, that's hilarious. Crashing the game and losing your save file and being unable to open the game at all for some reason isn't funny at all. Lagging the game because you've lit half the town on fire doesn't feel that upsetting to experience, but the game lagging for no reason doesn't feel fun to experience, and you can't even rationalize it as, well, it was my fault for doing that in some way. And I'm playing the Steam version of the game too. The OG was way worse with its bugs. There's a ton of stuff that got patched out, so I can only imagine how unstable this game was prior. I like that many of these funnier bugs were left in the game for the sake of humor, because it does add a lot of personality, however. Just like the dude, the game itself is rough around the edges, flawed, difficult to get a hold of. But they did put in quite a bit of optimization work throughout this game's lifespan, so there was at least an attempt made, even if it can feel like a borderline kusoge at times. I'd like to think I have a lot of tolerance for questionably functional PC games because some of my favorite games of all time are incredibly hard to run on modern platforms, and I love finding weird, obscure gems from the late 90s or early 2000s. But throw me a frickin' bone here. I don't need the game to function well. I just need the game to function. And with the crash logs as my witness, I'm struggling here, man. With our civic duty done, we have to choose between the two furthest ends of town to walk through, so pick your poison. I decided to give Daddy Dearest a visit in his resting place, which means we have to cut through the church, which has been taken over by the radical Islamic fundamentalists. I wonder what running with scissors meant by this. The cemetery is easily one of the game's eerier locations, all the gravestones carelessly scattered around the hills and valleys next to the toxic waste landfill. Paradise doesn't care much for its dead, and we can see that with coffins out in the open and patchy grass where the bodies of once loved ones lay. Naturally, most of the readable headstones are funny little references or nonsense, but two in particular stand out. For one, our objective is to piss in our dad's grave, Mr. T. Dude Sr., born in 1954 and died in 1996, a hated and reviled father. Or this one here, Postal Storyline, brutally murdered on February 4th, 2002. So what gives? Mr. T. Dude Sr. sounds obvious. It's the Dude Sr., who is the dude we're implicitly playing as, I guess the Dude Jr.'s dad, who carries a ridiculous amount of implications here. Died in 1996, you know, a year before Postal came out. This could very conveniently explain why no one recognizes the dude from what happened in 1996 in the same town of Paradise, if he's his son, and potentially why there's no school there. So this implies he died around the same time as the massacre he committed, either self-inflicted or through law enforcement. But remember the second headstone. If the Postal storyline was murdered, does that mean we should consider nothing that happened in the first game canon at all? So is Dude's father just a guy who was literally named The Dude, who also named his son The Dude? No wonder why he's an outcast then. But if he's known as a hated and reviled father, it would make sense if he lived in paradise for some time to earn that reputation. The Dude only recently moved there as of the start of the game, so perhaps he left to escape some sort of abusive childhood, then came back? What about the demon theory from the first game? Was the original Dude demonically possessed, as some of the in-game notes implied? Maybe that's why he was a bad dad? It's hard to say because nothing is set in stone, despite the fact the epitaphs are literally set in stone. But the first game carried the mentality of, it's up to you to decide what's the truth. And that's what we have to employ here. You can believe whatever you want in Postal 2, because the game has no intentions to answer your questions, but not shun them either. You can think whatever you want, because the Dude's past can be as violent as you want it to be, just as the game itself can. Our task is to pee on his grave. Well, we get abducted by some hicks who kidnap us and strip us of our inventory and clothing and put us in a gimp suit to some weird reference to Pulp Fiction. And who knows who we were intended to pleasure. This is where the game's slogan of, it's only as violent as you are, is stretched to its absolute limit, and it almost mocks you with how tenuous it is. Several errands will always result in violence against you, like this one. As far as I know, being kidnapped and having to escape this moonshine rig is compulsory, and the only way around it is through some kind of exploit. How do you complete this as a pacifist? Just ignore the enemies. Don't swing a melee weapon or fire a single bullet. Which means all you can do is run and hide and hope your stockpile of healing items will save you, or find medkits. The game asks you to ignore the combat rather than have some way to circumvent it, which can work depending on the environment. But there are a few examples that throw you into a labyrinth where getting shot at is impossible to avoid and you just have to deal with it. I'm not asking for some bland cover system, but there's no real brain power being used past don't get hit, which is just not a thrilling way to play the game in my opinion. It's not that it's too difficult to do a pacifist run of the game, it's just teeth-grindingly boring. I don't really feel enthralled to just ignore combat. It doesn't feel like non-violent options are a legitimate thing you can choose to do all of the time, just a thing that's possible to do. Which is an important distinction. Usually you have to just be patient or have a lot of money to be non-violent, but several errands present no option whatsoever and force you into cramped locations. The mall errand that forced you into combat felt fine because there was plenty of space to move around in and simply leave if you didn't want to engage. But you have no choice here and with other tasks throughout the game. What's also odd is that, as far as I know, there's no secret exit to just bypass this if you're looking to avoid all conflict. That's not something I'd normally complain about, but when so many of the first tasks have those built in, I do feel like I'm not entirely at fault for expecting that in some form. Sometimes I feel like this game was designed with Monday in mind first, and the later tasks were done at the end when everyone was exhausted and running low on energy and resources. They just feel a lot less multifaceted. It doesn't help that this moonshine brewing operation has some annoying platforming, and you get your items back in a really dumb way. They aren't just stored in a single room like in the police lockup evidence room, they're scattered throughout. I assume that having a more limited inventory for the shootout was the intention, but having it placed in a select amount of spots means you'll just pick up random assortments of items that may or may not be useful instead of just having better enemy weapon variety to loot on standard difficulties and having all your stuff at the end. I'm sure some people liked it, but I didn't. Now it's finally the time I'll go into depth about this game's core combat. Over an hour into the video. Leave a like for that one. Postal 2's combat seems dead simple on the surface. Just pick up your gun of choice and point and click, shoot Serious Sam style. Most weapons operate exactly how you'd expect them to. Pistols, shotguns, rifles. This is all common knowledge. But this game's combat is truly befitting of its sandbox genre once you start to examine the hidden depth. There are some incredibly creative weapons out there, but the most common weapons you'll be using are incredibly standard. I honestly think the pistol was the most consistently useful gun for me because it deals quite a lot of damage and ammo is beyond plentiful. You're capable of headshotting enemies for greater damage, if not an insta-kill, so a couple well-placed pistol shots from distance might do you better than wildly fired shotgun shells or machine gun bullets. And to be honest, I kinda hate the machine gun. It's not a bad weapon, it's just you end up using it so much that I'm sick of seeing it and hearing it. It gives me the same vibes as the Half-Life 2 SMG, where you end up using it for the majority of the game and you're beyond sick of the point and shoot of it all. You get tired of its model, tired of the boring ass fire sound, something about it itches my brain the wrong way. Standard shotgun it's a standard shotgun, what do you want me to say? The throwables are kind of what you'd expect. I've explained the quirkier parts of grenades and the Molotov cocktails and dynamite work as expected, but a ton of these weapons aren't just for throwing in the distance. You can sort of place traps. Right-clicking some of these will allow you to drop it inertly and have enemies run into it by themselves, which is amazing when you remember that the cutscenes of them storming your locations are in-engine, which you can easily exploit. Fire also works as a spotty but incredibly fun situational tool. The gas can be used to pour flammable liquid wherever you please and ignite it with a match, which is a little too premeditated to use in a pinch, but still a thrilling tool in your kit. It doesn't really help that taking fire damage means you have to stop everything and extinguish yourself. The more things change, the more they stay the same, eh? Enemies don't tend to have a lot of health, but armor does play a factor for the stronger ones you'll fight on Thursday and Friday, which can add 100 to 200 extra health. That doesn't mean to pump more lead into them all the time. You are free to do so, however, but get creative. Throwables, fire, explosives, there are a ton of options here. The wilder weapons are very hidden, and you have to go out of your way to find a lot of them early. This does sort of lead into the problem that your first blind playthrough of this game might feel stale because you likely won't find a wacky weapon, so you'll be stuck with the boring shotgun and machine gun for 99% of your playtime. So I'll save the explanation of the larger throwables and explosives later on, which is likely when you would encounter them. It's not a flaw that you have to actively scout for the sillier weapons, because map knowledge is a core component of this game, but that downside is that you'll be stuck with the boring stuff for a long time. Except if you get the sawed-off shotgun, that thing is ridiculous and one-taps basically everything in the game as on a boss. I really want to highlight my favorite weapon class in this entire game, the melee weapons. Melee tends to feel like an afterthought in most FPS games, and, well, the genre is called first-person shooter for a reason. A lot of games only have one option for melee, and it's usually some dinky knife or wrench or whatever. It's boring and uninspired, but it's typically only a mechanic you would use situationally, last resort. Postal 2 begs to differ. The dude's melee options range from practically worthless to insanely overpowered with nothing in between. Options like the picketing sign, shovel, and brass knuckles don't deal much damage at all, but others like the baseball bat and especially the shears are outrageously powerful tools that are capable of instantly killing foes with a headshot. The shears especially, man, I love these things so much. It's one of the game's stealth weapons, which means it won't alert any NPC into fleeing or attacking you upon pulling it out, so you can just snip people's heads right off their necks like the Scissor Man. Armed foes have the ability to block melee attacks with larger guns like shotguns and rifles. But the feature's really janky, and you can easily circumvent this by just aiming carefully because the body targeting feature it's just a mess, man. Given how most NPCs will just ignore corpses next to them, a whole room of cops can be cleared with the bat or shears alone and make you feel like Lo Wang.
Just call me Ginsu.
There's really nothing stopping the player from just hiding around the corner and headshotting everyone who funnels through the door, and it's one of the most satisfying combat encounters you could ever have in a first-person video game. Bar none. We even have a non-lethal option in the form of the shocker. Some weapons even have hidden functions that might not be useful all the time, but are situationally interesting. The volley deals minor damage and can inflict bleeding when you stab someone in the head, but a backstab is a guaranteed kill. Not really useful for active combat, but it's always hilarious to sneak kill some random schmuck minding their own business. NPCs have individual limbs you can target, so even if you can't hit the head for some reason, the shears can snip off arms and make them run away bleeding until they die. The future expansions add melee weapons that are even more overpowered and fun, but pretend they don't exist for now, because I'll have to bring them up when I talk about those expansions. The most entertaining part of this game's combat is that nearly every strategy is valid in some way. Straight shooting, melee only, fire explosive, kicking and pissing. The world is truly your oyster when it comes to the game's combat, and you're free to maim everyone in your path as you please, which makes the attempt to do a pacifist run really unsatisfying in my opinion. There's just nothing rewarding or as enticing as combat as an alternative incentive. Do you see that? That's the skull! That's Christian Bale! That's the Christian Bale skull! Okay, in my Postal 1 video, I shared an anecdote that a skull painted on one of the level loading screens looks like a weird, possibly false memory I had of watching the movie American Psycho, where one of the scenes had like a 1% skull overlaid on the Christian Bale's face. And there it is! There it is again! Maybe I was mixing my games up? Okay, no one who watched that video without watching this one first knows what I'm talking about, so I'm just gonna let this be our little inside joke and shame the rest of you into subscribing and watching my back catalog. Managing health is kind of odd in this game. Crack is your most accessible form of health restoration because they bump up your health to 125 in most difficulties, but you suffer from withdrawals and lose 25% of your health after 5-6 minutes unless you smoke another one. You can find these lying around or buy them from various crack vendors. You can also find various bits of food to restore 5 to 10 health per bit. Pizza, donuts, ambiguous fast food, whatever. Medkits are the best form of healing because they give you 30 health until you're maxed out on health and have no downsides, but they cannot be stored in your inventory, and can't be bought unless under extremely limited circumstances, which means you have to scout the map to find stockpiles of them wherever. It turns the combat into a game of strategy, where you can take everyone on head-to-head and then find medkits, or be smart and know the map in and out to leave kits until you need them and plant traps. Both options are valid, and it's what keeps Postal 2's combat fresh, so long as the maps are good. What I'm defining as a good map is one that gives you as many options as possible. Options to straightforwardly kill people, leave the building, plant traps, extra routes to tunnel through, cleverly hidden stockpiles of ammo and or medkits, just all the bells and whistles to express yourself in this violent sandbox. The mall is a great map, while the brewery is far too linear for my liking. And unfortunately, there are only more examples of the crowded linear buildings like this to go through as we progress. Something interesting this game hardly ever does is having to do another errand after you finish the first. We have to pick up our dry cleaning after escaping the brewery and become targeted by the rednecks because we're still in that stupid gimp suit, which makes NPCs laugh at us until we change into our regular clothing, which costs $100 and can only be found at money shots. It makes me wonder how errands could have progressed if we chose to be violent or run away from an encounter. Like if obtaining Coleman's autograph could have been more dynamic, but I'm still mostly satisfied with how the game played out. There's basically no downside to killing the dry cleaning guy and picking up your clothes for free, so we just head to the far side of town to find a Christmas tree in July and get targeted by rednecks again for another combat encounter. For some reason, you don't become a target of the rednecks here, only during the grave encounter. Odd. Okay. Not much to say on that one, and we're on to the next day. Today's a big day. Get napalm to burn our weeds. Yes, somehow we have weeds despite not having grass. Get a limited edition Bad Touch Crotchy doll, pay a parking ticket, and pick up some steaks for a barbecue the dude is apparently attending. Somehow the weirdest task in all that is the steaks. Since when the hell did he have friends?
And steaks for the Psychotic Friends Network barbecue.
Starting today, the mysterious mayor of Paradise has called in the ATF to deal with an unknown serial killer, who serves as an upgrade to the police. They have far more armor and come packing much more heat, and I think it's a welcome change since your inventory has likely grown substantially. There still needs to be some pushback against the total chaos you can inflict on people. It's still important to have some limitations on the sandbox environment. If you can just no-clip and do whatever you want, then there wouldn't really be any challenge and people would just get kind of bored instantly. The cards are still very stacked in your favor regardless. but I appreciate there was at least an attempt to not let the carnage come completely free. I ran instantly to Meat World, Paradise's only butchery, to pick up what looks like some classic strip loins, which, as a former butcher, look pretty thin on the fat. Not bad. Unfortunately, the Meat World is one of those encounters where you have no choice but to be thrown into combat. No one's at the counter, so you have to go all the way back of the store to get your strip loins, which of course alerts the butchers, who become the next group to target you, then the police when you have to make your escape. I will say it's at least visually much more appealing than the brewery. The temperature-controlled back cooler garishly mixed with bathrooms and whatever the hell this is at least nostalgic to me, and I like the subplot of people being kidnapped and turned into meat for consumption that the dude does not question at all. We've got a parking ticket to pay, and we can approach this in several different ways. The easiest way is just to pay the $300? Fuck that, I'm not doing that shit. Well, where do you even obtain $300? Just like the weapons, you can find little corners of dollar bills all around the map, and some enemies drop small amounts. You can kick ATMs to get like 20-30 bucks a day. But several of these errands on Thursday and Friday are seriously expensive. How do you obtain these large sums of money? Well, that's the bank's purpose. Most errand places aside from the mall stop being useful or are outright closed when you're done. But the bank can actually be robbed every single day of the week for a scaling amount of money, which is basically the only way to actually pay some of these fines. So on my pacifist run, I robbed the bank 5 times. This is my prime example of why pacifism and obeying the law is hardly a real route to consider in the game, because when you are allowed to prevent a combat situation, the only thing you can really do is just pay out the ass. Had there been more examples, like having to give up some of your weapons or do some other ridiculous errand that's tacked on additionally, then it could have made for a much more entertaining and thorough route that would have made pacifism worth playing past the future Steam achievements and bragging rights. I also think it's disappointing you can't entirely beat the game as a goody two-shoes, at least as far as I know. Let me know if it's possible to be a true pacifist without breaking the law whatsoever. I would love to know, because I couldn't do it myself. I sure as hell didn't pay in my first route, so I had to storm the entire building because the drop-off is at the very end of the station. Of course. You know the drill. Kill or avoid everyone in sight, yada yada. But there is an arsenal that only the police can access. So I went all the way to the end of the station, dropped off my ticket without paying to get the errand scratched off, and raided the locker room, where I found a police officer's outfit that can drastically change NPC behavior. Firstly, I entered that room and got to the goodie stash, but while wearing the uniform, you can freely attack and even kill civilians so long as you don't attack another cop. Feel like going Postal and having commentary about police brutality at the same time? Just don the suit and bludgeon as many homeless and minorities as you possibly can. If you don't agitate the police, they'll actually outright ignore you, even in scenarios like the raid in Meat World. Now that is a fantastic option for escaping combat and consequences. The cop suit is a huge boon that completely changes police involvement in several missions and adds an extra dimension to everything. But that isn't to say the Gimp suit doesn't have extra functions that I didn't realize. It makes most NPCs laugh at you, which is incredibly useful as a distraction tool to escape combat, and with the exception of the rednecks, you can be totally ignored by every other hate group out to get you. These are the only costumes in the game, and they both have huge upsides that make wearing them a considerable offer. They're balanced by vanishing from your inventory the next day and being super hard to get normally. Starting on Thursday, the laundromat carries uniform for an extortionate $500. This uniform in the police station is the easiest one to get, and seeing as you can pillage and sow discord how you see fit as long as you don't hurt other cops' feelings, it's not hard to see why. It's balanced quite well to skirt the accusation of being game-breaking, which feels nice. I wonder if there were ever any other outfits planned to disguise yourself as one of the groups that hate you, or maybe a terrorist outfit? Wait, that's probably a bad idea. With our new disguise, we can gracefully slink past the cops to the napalm factory, why that exists in town is beyond me, to fetch some palm, as the kids say, to tend to our weeds. And by fetching napalm, I actually mean fetching a napalm gun, which leads me to talk about the fun topic of rocket launchers. We just so happened to pick up a rocket launcher from the cop shop today, and it's not your everyday RPG. It has a huge tank of ammo and runs on rocket fuel rather than individual missiles, which means the only thing stopping your ability to spam rockets are crowded spaces, which is probably a given. Holding down left click all the way will activate a Half-Life-esque heat-seeking mode controlled by your crosshair, while holding down right click just increases distance. You can spam it or even snipe out enemies with a steady hand, and while it's one of the harder to find weapons hidden around the map, open areas bend the knee to this green tube of death. There is a pretty nasty downside. Enemies that hold this weapon are the most goddamn annoying things this game has to offer. They appear on the last days of the week in normal difficulties, or even earlier in the harder ones. And that heat-seeking feature is far more effective in their hands than yours, because according to the game's wiki, those missiles are 6 times faster than yours. They can be shot out of the air and even kicked out of commission, but when some jackass is holding one of these and you have to shoot a pinprick-sized missile out of the air or watch your armor evaporate and a third of your health vanish, it can definitely feel like a tall order. I'm not arguing that it isn't fair, I'm arguing it's annoying as shit. That's probably a good thing for gameplay balance, all things considered, but I'm still cheesed off about it. The napalm launcher has its own ammo source and is another fire-based weapon that can switch between straight arcing shots or bouncing projectiles that spray everywhere. There's also a grenade launcher that uses your grenades to shoot much faster, and it's easily one of the best weapons in the entire game. You start finding ammo for these more commonly in the later half of the week, of course. One last weapon category I want to talk about: large throwables. The most misfit category in the game consisted of 2 options: scissors and cowheads. The scissors, I'm convinced, are a joke weapon put in just because of the company's name, so you can literally run with scissors. They basically just act like shurikens with an alt fire that lets you bounce them off the walls, but they deal so little damage they aren't worth your time whatsoever. And cowheads? You throw them and it lets out this foul gas that stuns enemies until they bleed out and die, which can be exacerbated by shooting it. It's actually a pretty good weapon, but they are really hard to find, so I just never used them. I haven't talked about the cats! See, these inventory cats aren't just for show. They're actually this game's form of suppressors. You simply attach the nozzle of a specific gun to the cat's anus, and the bullets, or shells, shoot out of its mouth until it launches the poor kitty as a separate projectile. Not only are these a genuinely useful tool for nearly every possible combat scenario, it's one of the edgiest things this game does by a long shot. There aren't that many other games I can think of where you can outright kill animals. People get extremely sensitive about killing animals more than they do with people, so there aren't that many bigger FUs you can do past that than killing children, which the original Postal didn't even do. You can also sell them at the pet store in the mall if you choose to be complicit in whatever beast love has in store. One of the very few things running with scissors won't joke about is killing kids. Molestation is cool and all, but not killing them. Until the movie, that is. It's not even that there's just one stock cat model, there are multiple different breeds of cats roaming Paradise that all look distinct. There was a ton of effort put into these cats inside of Paradise, and it makes me proud to shoot them off the end of my guns. I do have a bit of a story about the cat mechanic. I was playing this game casually in 2024 after I bought a new computer, and I distinctly remember I was playing on Tuesday in the library. I had some of my friends over to see how the game worked, and they weren't familiar with Postal too much. I knew one of them happened to be a cat lover, so I told them, equip the cat and press E. And I got to see a live reaction of the shock and disgust on their face as the cat was used as a suppressor and then shot out into gory chunks, and I laughed right in their face. I'd say I'd feel bad, but it was really funny to watch. I regretted nothing, and I would do it again. It's just one of those games you want to introduce to strangers for the first time, just to see their reactions, no matter the year. Only one thing left to do, and that's get me a Bad Touch Crotchy. Crotchy's another one of these franchises' mascots, and it's not hard to see why. He's an anthropomorphic dick and balls, what do I gotta say? Nothing, because the mayor declared Thursday Crotchy Day. He's all the rage in Paradise. It doesn't matter if you want him or not, he's there regardless, you just have to deal with it. There's a guy dressed up as him working at Toys in the Hood, oh my god. But predictably, there aren't any left.
We be all sold out and shit.
This is a really dynamic errand because there aren't 2 ways to solve it, but 3. Firstly, Crotchy's full of shit and has a doll on him, and we can pay for it in exchange for all the money in our inventory. All of it. There's no fixed price. Secondly, we can show our support for black-owned businesses by rushing into the back and getting shot at by the employees, then the police, and then Crotchy himself, who is the strongest enemy in the game, by the way. He has the highest health out of anyone and is completely immune to bullets. He carries a shotty and a rocket launcher, which means you had better get out of that store and fight him in a more spacious part of the mall. And if you want to escape with your life, you better bring some explosives. But there's actually a third option I don't think the game ever tells you about. You can give him the Gary Coleman book you got from Tuesday in exchange for the toy, which you've actually kept in your inventory the entire time. There are very few errands that can be backdoored like this, and it makes me wish there were more because I felt like a genius when I tried this out. Most errand items just vanish from your inventory when the next day rolls around. But what if we can be rewarded for being creative more often? Plenty of basically junk items litter our inventory after that errand is scratched off, but there's usually a way to get them back, often on the bank's top floor. It feels like a missed opportunity to have these items be worthless once obtained when they could have been used for some really creative puzzle solving that required experimentation. I would argue it's a perfect implementation of the sandbox mentality the rest of the game has. Apparently you could buy these on the company's modern website once upon a time. Why is the doll called Bad Touch Crotchy anyways?
Daddy said only he could touch me like that. Mama said don't touch me there. Don't touch me. I'm calling my lawyer.
After some traumatic childhood flashbacks, I returned back to my trailer for the final day. We're in the end stretch, boys. Let's get ready to rock and roll. Some surprisingly pedestrian tasks for a Friday. Pick up a package from the post office, finally find a new alternator for our broken down car, and deliver a birthday present to our local cult leader inside his fortified compound. All things we've done before. The dude will have new voice lines throughout the day saying how much he needs to take a leak, and if we do,
I'm really gonna bust if I don't take a piss immediately.
Turns out we've got an STD that needs to be cured at our local clinic. But here's the kicker. This errand doesn't pop up unless you pee. You can skip this task entirely and let the dude suffer if you so desire, which is awesome. Let him keep the STD, it's better for the speedruns, is a completely valid sentence. This piss is actually super enhanced and causes most NPCs to vomit instantly when pissed on, so for Friday, you technically get a piss upgrade, but it does take 1 tick of health for every second of urine. The compound is the furthest possible location from your house, so I decided to go there first to get it out of the way. Remember how the ATF came to visit? Running with Scissors dares to ask, what if the Waco siege was hilarious? The ATF has already surrounded the compound of the elusive cult of Uncle Dave, who may or may not be the biological uncle of the dude, but it's ambiguous and makes me feel icky to think about.
The good book told me to make you die, then myself.
All we've got to do is simply get inside and give Dave his birthday present, but the ATF will kill us on sight. If we've purchased a police uniform, or are just extra careful, we can sneak around into the compound, but there is an easier solution. The sniper rifle is overpowered. No debate, or bells, or whistles. It's just too damn strong. You have some explosive weapons that give you long range, but genuinely nothing compares to the scope of this rifle, and since headshots are an insta-kill on nearly everyone, just having ammo for this thing and being just out of the NPC's aggression zone means you will instantly win this encounter so long as you've played any other video game that requires a sniper rifle weapons level of precision. You can hip fire for less accuracy, but why would you do that? If you found a position where no one else can see or find you, you win. There's hardly any skill or premeditation, just getting the drop on someone is almost a given. The only times the sniper rifle won't be useful is when you're rushed in close corridors, and even then, you can still headshot people from short distances, it just means you'll take slightly more chip damage. Weapon balance is kinda nonsense in this game, especially with all the stuff the expansions added, but long-range encounters are where it's stretched to its absolute limit. Because at least the explosive weapons require more effort to snipe something across the map. Pathfinding for NPCs is a joke, so lining up heads is hardly a tall task. I don't want to sound too upset that the weapon is overpowered, because who the hell is asking for sensible weapon balancing in Postal 2? but it does just feel a little bit too easy to use. There's at least some risk with melee and rockets and fire that make you think twice before brainlessly using them. The only thing holding you back from using the rifle for like half the encounters in the game is the ammo count, but you're gonna quickly learn that rooftops carry more than enough ammo to last a lifetime if you're looking. I don't entirely blame Postal 2 though. Nearly every game with an obligatory sniper rifle weapon runs into the problem of that being the only option for long distance, and it becomes pretty stale pretty quickly. Even the best games can fall into that trap. The people in the compound are actually pretty chill with us, which is good because I changed my mind about giving Dave his birthday present, whatever it is. What do they believe? I don't know. Oh well, the ATF storms the building once the errand is done, and you can disguise yourself or fight them. But since the compound is such a long walk away from town, the real game strat is to let yourself get arrested to get teleported to the town's police station, then breaking out, and it'll save you so much time. This works a lot better if you leave the compound as your final task, but it's 200 IQ regardless. If you don't, then I hope you like walking the equivalent to the Trail of Tears, now with added rocket launchers. It's so stupid. After taking out some of my frustrations on the innocent, I make a stop by the clinic, pee into a cup for a robot, and get a free cure to my gonorrhea. Wait, free? I thought being extorted by the healthcare system was like the whole point of America. If you want the Canadian experience, you just have to wait 8 hours in-game and then slowly die of a treatable condition until the hospital releases a public statement basically saying, LOL. The clinic isn't too far from the junkyard, so I took a visit to Mike J's and talked to the guy running the place, and he's asking $500 for a junk alternator? What? I thought junkyards were free. Fuck this guy. I had to rob the bank in my pacifist playthrough to get all of that, but I'm normally a little strapped for cash, and I think I just tend to piss him off somehow anyways. I've got to cut across this maze of cubed up cars to find the alternator, then find my way out the hard way when that exit closes. You get chased by over a dozen rabid dogs, which is why I kept all the doggy treats I've collected throughout the game safe for now. These doggy treats turn any dog into your ally, regardless if it was hostile 5 seconds ago, which means you can build a small army of a dozen pit bulls when you leave the junkyard just like that. Dogs can do a shocking amount in this game. They don't just attack, they can fetch severed heads and even weapons to go play with. Champ, the dude's dog, is of course included, but he tends to wander around town beforehand. Just maybe avoid bringing cats into the fray. There's actually another type of dog, but it's quite hidden. It's only available in the secret exit accessible from Lunky Ganesh in the library. There's a pit you have to cross with a ton of these burned, fleshy hell dogs, which have so much more health they are practically invincible to all damage, but they can be momentarily stunned by fire. What exactly these things are and what they're doing is never explained in classic Postal fashion, but they scare me a lot. I think this place is implied to be some kind of entrance to hell or something, making these hellhounds. This is an eerie area.
I gotta find more of that good stuff. Oof.
We can head to our next task right away, but Friday has a ton of unique things going on to spice things up. Just go visit places like the jail cell in the mall. Trust me, it's worth it. The final task ahead of us is to pick up our package, which in my opinion is the worst errand in the entire game. It starts off with a bang by being flanked by terrorists and other hate groups at all times with the strongest possible weapons for your respective difficulty. There are plenty of places to hide and make strategies, houses to sneak through and to restock, and a few secrets. It's probably the game's trickiest encounter, but also the best example of how creative you can be. Or you can just snipe everyone, take all the fun out of it. When we get inside the post office is where all that fun goes right out the window. Since the package is from Afghanistan and definitely hasn't been sent by Bin Laden, you have to pay $100 in postage. But in a diabolical rug pull, choosing to pay or outright kill the attendant has the same outcome of you needing to fight your way through the back, and it's stupid. $100 isn't an unreasonable amount of money to have by this point, but I guess the joke's on me and the package explodes if you pay because there's a bomb. If you just kill the people at the front and collect it yourself, it doesn't explode, but the place locks down anyways, which completely misses the point of the entire game. The whole gimmick of Postal 2 is being able to choose to go postal or not. But this is easily the most fraudulent task possible. It doesn't help this place is a fucking nightmare to travel through on Pacifist as well. Hope you stocked up on crack, because there's literally nothing to do but get pumped full of holes through a maze and eventually make it out the other end. It's the worst example of a forced combat encounter, and it completely flies in the face of a typically lauded ability of the player to choose, in a fashion far more irritating than butchery. Actually, turns out there is an exploit where you can just jump over the boxes to completely skip this section. No idea if it was intentional or not, but it's awesome, and I definitely didn't find it until way too late, but that's on me. Oops. And we're in a post office! This game is named Postal! There are hardly any jokes featured in here at all, aside from the package coming from Bin Laden. What gives? I couldn't find any mention of the company being sued by the US Postal Service when the first game came out in the office. Nothing like that at all. Maybe it's some ultra-obscured poster I missed, but it feels like a huge waste to make a post office area and then have almost no jokes about it whatsoever. This is why I theorized the last days felt like they were designed last, because it often pales in comparison options-wise to the start of the week. I don't think the game peaked early, mind you. I think Thursday is tied with Monday for being my personal favorite day of the week in game, but some days are definitely better than others. If I had to rank the vanilla 5 days of the game, it would go Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. Friday's tasks require a lot of walking around, a ton of money for the pacifist route, and generally aren't even that funny, which is kind of a sour note to end the game on, is what I would say until our final task comes up. When you cross off all the errands on your list and hit the next loading zone, something happens. Out of nowhere, apropos of nothing, with no warning, the apocalypse strikes. How did the Paradise Times know that? Why did it happen now? Don't worry about it. What the apocalypse means for Paradise is that every single NPC is on high alert and fires at everyone and everything. A mass postal event has occurred and there are no brakes on this train. Also, cats rain from the sky and squelch on the ground viciously. Every other day teleports you back to your trailer automatically, but we've got to walk on our own 2 feet from here and breathe in doomsday, which smells like dead cats and rocket fuel. Everyone you run into has lost their minds and are hell-bent on killing you, each other, and themselves, which sounds way more threatening than it actually is. Cops in the ATF are going to be way too preoccupied dealing with everyone else to notice you. So what that means is that you get to casually scroll past everyone shooting each other and leaving you alone, which is kind of awesome. How far you walk depends on what you left your last task to be. Historically, I always did the compound last, but now I know to get arrested instead of walking because the cop shop is just a skip away from home sweet home. But let's really take it all in and see Paradise off with one last leisurely stroll. Well, as leisurely as possible. Finally, we make it to our home sweet home. Unfortunately, things don't go so well for us.
Honey, I'm home. You won't believe the day I've had.
About friggin' time. Did you remember my rocky road?
I had no idea what a rocky road was until I looked it up, and apparently it's some kind of melted chocolate and marshmallow dessert, kind of like a worse than Nanaimo bar. Or maybe it's ice cream flavor? I don't know. The dude totally brain farted, and we don't even have an opportunity to grab the rocky road. And the game ends with a gunshot and a song, On Silent Wings by Arizona-based metal band Writhe, which Mike J and others actually happened to play for, which is pretty cool. We know exactly how the gunshot played out thanks to future DLC, but I'd imagine back when this game came out, it was a lot more ambiguous. The dude could have shot himself in the head or killed his wife. Either outcome is pretty likely. The only time going postal is mandatory is to end on a boomer punchline of "hate me wife," which is pretty swag if I do say so myself. And that finally brings a close to Postal 2 in the most absurd way possible. The credit screen is a little beefier in this version because of all the modern tweaks, but we get one good last look at our results screen, which shows us all the kills we've gotten in general in specific ways, doors kicked, etc. There are certain titles bestowed upon the player depending if they favor doing an in-game action over others, like pissing or sniping, or depending if you beat the game on one of the higher difficulties. Really, I'm just shocked I decapitated that many people on my normal playthrough. Here are my results for my pacifist playthrough, and I lost the footage for my third violent playthrough. Oops. However, like any good sandbox, completing the game doesn't just allow us to play it again. We have some new toys to play around with. Firstly, there's a cheat menu which does exactly what it describes and allows you to dump more sand into the box with getting all the weapons and specific items, or turning all NPCs into Gary Coleman, or Bin Laden, or Crotchy, whatever. I recommend you look through the list and just see how much you can bend the laws of reality in your favor. The enhanced kick is a favorite of mine. The cheat menu, I think, is a modern quality of life inclusion. Back in the day when games had cheat codes, you had to remember specific inputs or open the developer's console on PC. Now I may be a zoomer, but I've played enough Serious Sam to know this routine by heart. For Postal 2, Sissy unlocks the ability to cheat, and from there, just look up the codes, have fun. I remember when I used to call no-clipping ghosting back in the day. Good times. Beating this game at least once also unlocks something very interesting. Welcome to Enhanced Mode, Postal 2's new game plus that fundamentally changes countless aspects of your toolkit to make Paradise somehow even crazier. And we're gonna take a look. What's in store for New Game Plus, you ask? Well, weapons and exotic items spawn at much higher frequencies, meaning that I was able to collect like 2/3 of all possible weapons on Monday alone, and you spawn with some swag in your inventory for almost each day. Not exciting enough? Fine. Any fire or fall that isn't a bottomless pit or death zone like the library does 0 damage. Okay, how about this? Postal Dude's Piss now has the rotating attributes of the 5 classical elements of Chinese culture: napalm, gas, blood, puke, gonorrhea. Right-clicking when your fly is down will cycle through all of these, and since you're immune to fire, there's no reason not to just piss napalm at people all the time with 0 downsides whatsoever. And not once does it not become hilarious. You have to hear what our weapons can do now, because Enhanced Mode can turn worthless garbage weapons into absolutely essential pieces of kit, but also turn amazing weapons into garbage. The shovel is our starting weapon and is total trash in the base game, not even worth using as a joke. But Enhanced Mode says, hold my health pipe, and not only doubles its rate of fire, but makes it act like a movement tool by flinging dude in the opposite direction of where it was swung, which can be spammed and used to launch yourself in the air as you please, with the only downside being geometry collision. This radically changes everything, because we can hop over blocked off roads to enter parts of Paradise we weren't meant to, or scale rooftops for goodies as much as we want much easier. The craziest part is that it still does garbage damage. Many guns receive brand new alt fires. The shotgun can shoot out explosive shots, the machine gun can shoot bouncing scissors, and the regular throwing scissors make us run at 3 times speed when held. I really encourage you to look at a list of weapon changes because some of these are absolutely puzzling. The sniper rifle especially. For some reason it shoots explosives, which totally cuts the ability to headshot foes, which was the whole point, which makes it a genuinely less useful weapon in my eyes, and I'll never understand why they made that change. Even being unarmed offers something new. We can pick up objects or NPCs and throw them with a charging bar with the right click. If you've ever seen the original Sonic Adventure and throw that weird statue into the ocean, it's like that, but on catnip and with everyone. Plus, there's a brand new weapon we can play with called the Box Launcher. It was normally only available in one little spot at the Running with Scissors office inside this crate, but for some reason the Steam version removed it and only made it accessible with cheats. Weird. It launches a randomly colored box that will instantly kill anyone upon contact, yourself included, and cause their ragdoll corpse to fly around sporadically and insta-kill anything it touches. It's absolutely a joke weapon, but no one's ever said it wasn't funny, because it is. There's much more changes to Enhanced Mode. But what stays the same? The errand system is completely unchanged. Same tasks, same methods of completion, same sandbox. Except instead of the sand pit, it's filled with Floam. Remember Floam? Or at least commercials about Floam? I remember wanting that so bad and never getting it as a little kid, so I have to wonder if it was ever good. I'll just toss Floam in the 2000s toys I wanted but never got and bought in my 20s to try and relive a broken childhood pile. And what an incredible Floam box Postal 2 is. For 2003, basically the only comparable game that matched this level of interactivity and wanton destruction was Grand Theft Auto. But nothing really aligned with the prideful tastelessness of Postal 2. As I've hopefully proven, there's an outrageous amount of depth and basically infinite replayability within this game, which is all the more impressive when you consider that the premise is complete a set of errands for 5 days out of the week. Most open world games are very comfortable with having a linear story mode and side missions sprinkled throughout their towns and cities, but Postal 2 simply decided to do its own thing and blend that together to combine the structure and satisfaction of completion within the structure of a weekday, but also the free-flow whimsy of getting lost and finding things to do and stumbling across side quests. You wouldn't assume this game is smart by looking at it, and it certainly doesn't present itself as such, but I do genuinely believe this game's structure and ability to almost perfectly read the player's mind was a masterstroke by the madmen at Running with Scissors, to the point where Postal 2 shares a ton of similarities with another genre, the immersive sim. What is an immersive sim? It's easier just to show examples, like System Shock, Deus Ex, Thief, those kind of games. It's kind of hard to pin down a single definition everyone agrees on, but the closest I can find is that it's a genre with a ton of interlocking systems that all bump shoulders and focus on player expression. Easiest example ever is this. You need to sneak past a guard and get inside a room. You can just kill him, or distract him by throwing something, or take a secret route that gets you to the same room from another location. That's an extremely basic definition, and it's a complicated genre that people still contest to this day. But does that example sound familiar to you? It's the way that there's a ton of valid options to solve the same problem, how you can choose any of these ways to approach a situation. Postal 2 has an absurd amount of mechanics that, while not quite bordering on RPG territory, kind of rubs shoulders with it. You can kill people or outright ignore combat. You can piss on everyone and still get into that bank vault. I highly doubt this was Running with Scissors' intention, but it just felt right to me. No two playthroughs of this game will be exactly alike. You'll use different weapons, do errands in different orders, and every time you play, you'll discover new things, new ways to traverse paradise faster, new secret areas of ammo and money, an Easter egg you never thought possible. Running with Scissors simply understands the mind of gamers because they're gamers too. They've come a long way from playing Robotron in their office, and Postal 2 is what they had to show for it. With every throb of this game's heart, it regrets nothing. And neither shall you. The confidence it has to be offensive and shocking is nothing short of refreshing, especially in the 2020s. So what is my final ranking of Postal 2? Well, it's kind of hard to say. It can be kind of troublesome to talk about because I'm not playing the original 2003 release, but slightly modifying the 2010 Steam release. I might have been singing a different tune had my load times and crashes been quadrupled, or if I accidentally talked about a feature that was added later unknowingly, which I'm sure I have. I don't need to tell any Postal fans to yell at me in the comments, because they do not play with their hyperfixation. They'll let me know what's up. If some things were fixed, like having more options for pacifism, make some tasks a little more open-ended, just include more things that let the player experiment and make the game a little bit more stable. Really, most of my critiques are things that the game has already set such a high standard for. The errands that were my least favorites were like that because I have other errands to compare them to. Its biggest flaws are usually just a result of lacking what made other things great instead of undermining those said great things. This week has high and low points, but everyone has their own favorite errands and days to choose from. And maybe that's what it was intended all along. At times, it doesn't feel like an individual game, but a franchise of its own. Of course, there are several sequels that are original games, but Postal 2 has its own subset of sequels, so it's entirely possible to just be a Postal 2 fan and not like or care about any other games the company has made. And I think a lot of people operate like that. There's nothing wrong with it, but I think that's the biggest testament to this game's outrageous success than anything else. But how exactly did we get there? How did this 2003 shooter game, sequel to the worst game ever, get to the point where it not only has it been supported throughout its entire life, but still brought up in the modern gaming conversations? Well, that's what the final chapter is all about. Running with Scissors like to compare the original Postal game to South Park, and it isn't hard to see why. Both properties came out in 1997 and went for a dark comedic tone, though the general public didn't really interpret Postal like that, which is also not hard to see why. So, if Postal is South Park, then Postal 2 is the Ren and Stimpy adult party cartoon, something made to intentionally upset and shock people by being tasteless and crass. And damn, it worked. The key difference here is that Running with Scissors were absolutely expecting critical backlash this time around, including the protesters, as such a major part of the game was undoubtedly a sign of such a thing, and they were pushing the envelope just to mess with people. The difference is that they never quite abandoned those South Park-esque routes because there is genuine thought, commentary, and intelligence featured here. It just doesn't present itself like that, purposefully to undermine people who are making fun of it for dumb reasons. But if you thought the original game's backlash was intense, wow, you haven't seen anything yet. Upon release, Postal 2 was thoroughly pulverized by critical reception, to put it lightly. Metacritic isn't really worth browsing, but if you choose to snoop through the critic reviews at the time, you will be aghast at the flurry of 0 out of 10 reviews and how harsh some of these people are. The gaming magazine Computer World Gaming went as far as to say, until someone boxes up syphilis and tries to sell it at retail, Postal 2 is the worst product ever foisted upon consumers. Foisted? That's more offensive than saying it's like syphilis. Who the hell says foisted? You'll read words like abysmal and harrowing, sprinkled in brutally worded, complete teardowns of the game as far as the eye can see. The best review I can find that echoed the common sentiment of critics at the time is this review from GameSpot. Writer Eric Wolpaw shredded this game a new one, lambasting its exhaustive load times, repetitive gameplay loop, potty humor, inconsistent AI, and the lack of cutting-edge graphical fidelity. Comparisons to GTA 3 were everywhere because the two games do share quite a bit of similarities, at least on the open world front and having so many adult elements. Standards were rising and Postal 2 was aggressively going against the grain, both tonally and graphically. As much as I love the flat textures and art style of this game, it was a common point of critique, because people generally wanted games to become more realistic as technology saw rapid improvements in the time period. And Postal 2 would struggle to stand out on the PlayStation 2, let alone the PC at the time. The black comedy angle was acknowledged with full force, which made critics roll their eyes and dismiss it as childishly offensive purely for offensiveness' sake, which was exactly the point, but they weren't having none of that. You could steal cars and zoom around the city in GTA, but Postal 2 had no functioning cars whatsoever, and you had to hoof it through exhaustive loading zones. I find it annoying that so many critics dismiss the combat as basic, because there is a lot more depth to it than I think they recognized, but if you were beelining the game with the pistol, shotgun, and machine gun, I can see why they'd say that. Postal 2's freeform gameplay was just not what critics expected or wanted whatsoever. Bad reviews are just that, bad reviews. Running with Scissors leaned into it, but the backlash with this game was only beginning, and more severe consequences began to pile up. More sensitive countries like New Zealand and Germany banned the game outright, with New Zealand threatening a fine and jail time up to a decade for anyone owning a copy. Who knew people would get upset at the ability to kill the Taliban and pee on their corpses? It's not like we were doing that in real life or anything. There was real moral panic over this game that just kept popping its ugly head every so often. This stigma against violent games was still in full swing, and people had to ask themselves, can a video game influence you to break the law? The game was blamed for various crimes, usually just a result of some lazy cop looking for quick evidence, But sometimes people who had done something violent had played the game before and people made a connection there, however dubious it may be. One incident I want to highlight is the Brown v. Entertainment Merchants Association decision, where the Supreme Court of America struck down a Californian law that would have otherwise greatly altered the distribution of video games with violent content in the state, especially if they were in any way in the hands of children. Postal 2 just so happened to be one of the primary examples for this, with several of its game mechanics brought center stage to make their argument more compelling. The original Postal was able to scrape by a lot of its own controversies by the skin of its teeth, but public opinion on the franchise and video games as a whole had shifted dramatically. Postal 2 absolutely did push the envelope, but it was amongst peers now. Games like Manhunt 2 and Modern Warfare 2's No Russian mission were right there getting just as much flack, and people were ready to publicly take a stand against these geriatric boomers flapping their gums about a whole bunch of nonsense. The Supreme Court actually ruled in favor of Postal 2 that day, citing that it was protected by the First Amendment, but like a fancy legal way. This was a huge landslide victory for video games in general, but no one was more excited than Postal 2's fanbase, which had become a considerable force. Critics panned the game, but reviews from individuals were positively glowing. Some people loved the game simply because it wasn't afraid to make a stand and be offensive for its own sake. Some loved the errand structure and open world, and others embraced its more egregious flaws as quirky little personality traits, beholden to one of the most unique games on the planet. Everyone had their own reasons, but the sentiment was here to stay. Critics hated it, but fans loved it. Postal 2 appealed to outsiders and loners, outcasts who went against the grain and didn't care what any esteemed reviewer or website had to say. Some of these fans were so zealous that they would harshly react to negative critique or bashing from critics, sometimes to the point of threatening violence. People who present themselves as edgelords or outcasts or generally just on the fringe of gaming will proudly display their love for Postal 2 alongside games like Sayana Uta or Needy Streamer Overload, stuff like that, ladies. And I feel that in full force. Part of my brand as Strange Gaming, the games I cover on this channel are the ones that are on the fringe, the kind of weird, experimental, creepy, threatening stuff, and Postal 2 is one of the best embodiments of being on the fringe of gaming to me. Despite the absurd amount of negative press and blacklisting, the game just persisted. Postal 2 was available to buy on store shelves, and not just in America. It was popular in several spots around the world, and eventually got ports to Mac and Linux, which was somewhat uncommon at the time. Running with Scissors were early adopters of Linux and fan input, so much so they packaged an official level editor tool in the original release just like they did in the first game, which led to many offshoots and modifications of the original game, some of which became very integral pieces of Postal 2's identity. Exact sales for the non-Steam version of the game are really hard to come by, but we at least know that it was the fastest selling game on its first month on the Linux platform seen yet, which is not an insignificant achievement. It wouldn't be inaccurate to say that Running with Scissors put their all into what could have been their last game before the company folded, and this dangerous, provocative effort was rewarded by the game becoming a great success, both on the store shelves and amongst pirates and bootleggers. Running with Scissors were clearly beyond grateful for this game being as big a hit as it was, and they decided to support that game not just for the future, but until this day, it's still given love. There were multiple expansions released throughout its life. Share the Pain, a multiplayer expansion that added some new areas to the base game and was released on the same year. Apocalypse Weekend was eventually released in 2005 and shows the events after Friday on Saturday and Sunday, which includes a zombie apocalypse, more Taliban stuff, whatever. There were releases that combined all of this into a Weekend of Paradise bundle, based on a fan mod of the same name. Postal 2 was eventually added to GOG in 2009, known as Postal 2 Complete with all that stuff included, which then became the Steam version just called Postal 2 in 2012, which brought more features like seasonal holiday events and new game mechanics. Paradise Lost was an expansion almost as big as the game itself, released in 2015. The game still gets updates in the form of compatibility for the Steam Deck. There was a whole 2023 update that added more quality of life features and a quit to desktop option. Yes, it did take them that long to make that. All of these changes make the Postal 2 of today a considerably different beast than what it was in 2003. I really struggle to compare this situation to anything when a single-player game maintains this much outstanding support, well over 20 years after release. But maybe we shouldn't be comparing it to anything at all. We can't find anything like Postal 2 because there's nothing else like it. There are other Morbid games, other sandbox games, other titles that have bits and pieces, but Postal 2 is more than the sum of its parts, and what it is as a full product is such a strong stance against common decency that anyone can see themselves as the dude and choose to try and obey the law or go postal as they please. None of this would be possible if fans hadn't supported the game and the company for as long as they did, and certainly not possible if Running with Scissors didn't believe in themselves and their product enough to release it with 2 middle fingers in the air. The game is crass and buggy and hard to grasp, but I wouldn't have it any other way. For better or for worse, there is no experience like Postal 2 on Earth. Postal 2's story is far from over. The booming success of the game meant the company could keep its doors open and continue forging on. And almost as soon as the ink was dried and the boxes were on store shelves, they just kept going at it. The story of the Postal franchise and Running with Scissors is a long and underappreciated one, and this is just the second installment of my coverage of the franchise. There's a Kickstarter campaign to fund an official remake of the game dubbed Postal 2 Redux, alongside a virtual reality version. It got the asking price in 24 hours, and now it's currently rounding its way to all the bonus promises, like the Pigeon Mission and far more. To me, this is the ultimate testament that Postal 2 succeeded, because 22 years after release, they can fund a full remake in a single day. I'll link the campaign below, and if you feel inclined, sign this petition, won't you? I hope you'll join me next time around when I take a look at Postal 2's insane fan content of old. The DLC for this game will come at a much later date, and you'll see why when it happens. But until then, have a lovely rest of your day. Stay strange.